I'd like to welcome everybody to this regular council meeting on Wednesday, December 12th, 2018, starting at 9 a.m. I'd like to start with disclosure of pecuniary interests and general nature thereof. Not seeing any. We'll move on to the reports. We're going to go a little bit out of order here. We're going to revisit the financial report 034 after we address the OnServe operating budget recommendations. So we want to just go straight to, and I'm going to have CEO talk of that right now.
I'm just actually requesting council, if they don't mind, if we could deal with the base budget request that's contained in the operating budget report, finance number 36. It's on schedule 3. It's the base budget regarding the server replacement and expansion, including the cloud-based solution. And the reason, number one, is that they've come out to answer any questions, technical questions, with respect to this base budget increase. And although it's contained in your operating, if council ends up supporting it, it has capital implications in terms of the purchasing of servers no longer necessarily being required. So that is the reason for bringing this matter forward. And the representatives from OnServe are here. I know Mary Beth and Matt are here. I'm sorry, I don't know the gentleman in the middle. Hi, Andrew. Okay, so they are here to answer your questions with respect to this particular base budget increase.
Does council have any questions for regarding the recommendations for the OnServe? Councillor Bulmer?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Yes, well, I understand the benefits of a cloud-based option with regards to backing up and additional security and all that stuff. I am concerned that it's an option that wouldn't be available for staff working here if the internet connection went down. But I guess of more concern at this point for the budget process is I'm trying to rationalize an option that's more than twice the cost of option 1, which is just replacing like with like, an internal server. And I'm struggling with trying to figure out why we would spend twice as much, more than twice as much, for essentially the same service with the enhanced security. So I don't know if staff can answer that, or if OnServe.
I can, I'll start, and then maybe OnServe can provide some assistance. One of the main benefits here is that it provides for more storage and faster services. We've been struggling with our current physical server, which has run out of space, and we're limited to the amount of users we can add and changes we can make. So a cloud option would actually allow us to modify and to add users to modify without the physical limitations that we currently have. And it would actually provide us with faster service as well, especially since we've recently switched internet providers. Is that fairly accurate, or would you like to add more?
Fairly accurate.
Okay.
Okay.
Matt, you're going to have to come up to the mic, please.
Yeah, so perhaps for greater clarity, I'm not talking about not replacing the existing server, but the new server that we put in, wouldn't it be faster and have greater storage and provide some of those benefits too? Or are we not talking apples to apples here?
You are. A new server, whether physical or cloud, would have the same performance advantages. The advantage you get out of a cloud server is that you will be able to increase, decrease, change your speed, change your performance on the drop of a hat. You're not actually changing hardware parts. Other people do that in a massive data center. All you do is change your licensing, you change your pricing, depending on what you need in the service you actually require.
Right. But it is possible. I'm still I'm wrestling with the fact it's more than twice the cost on the 5-year life cycle.
Yeah, however, in 5 years, when this physical server would be due for replacement, and we'd be paying $50,000. With a cloud-based server, we're not doing that. So if we actually look at longer than 5 years, that capital replacement cost in 5 years does not happen with a cloud-based server.
Oh, understood. But every 5 years, you're going to pay twice as much. Right now, we're looking at $42,000 to replace the existing one with something that's going to cost us almost $100,000 over 5 years. Right?
Mm-hmm. But your next one, there's no saying the next one at 5 years is going to cost you $50,000 again.
Right.
Your next one at 5 year could cost you $80,000.
But the monthly fees could also increase.
Monthly fees could also increase, but they have their limitations on where we can increase them. The problem is your licensing changes all the time with the amount of users and the way Microsoft changes their licensing. So licensing costs compared to when this server was bought back in 2012 or 2013 have changed dramatically compared to what they are now in 2018.
Okay, so then you're telling me that the 42,000 doesn't include, to replace the local server with another improved local server, that doesn't include the licensing costs?
No, that is included in licensing cost.
But you're
right now.
suggesting that 5 years from now, when it has to be replaced again, those licensing
The
costs,
cost could be much higher.
but they wouldn't, those licensing costs wouldn't be much higher on a cloud server as well?
They would be the same different licensing, but they're billed differently. So whereas you're absorbing all of the upfront costs of your licensing now,
Yep.
you'd be a monthly increment and bought at a different level. So when you buy it at a data center level, you're getting data center licensing,
Yep.
which is cheaper than buying it as yourself.
And if, I guess where my discomfort still is if it was 10% more to go for the cloud option, I get it. But when it's more than double the cost, it's hard to imagine it's not going to be more than double the cost again 5 years from now. I can't imagine that all of a sudden one's going to be growing that much more expensive. I still can't, anyhow, maybe others can explain it better than I can.
Yep, no, it's concerns that everybody has when they go to cloud.
Yeah.
It's a difference between a capital expense off the bat compared to just a monthly increase.
And I always, in my mind, whenever I can reduce ongoing operating costs, I'm in the long run further ahead. That's all I'm trying to get at. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Bulmer. Councillor Oida, any questions?
Can you just tell me a little bit more about licensing, what that means? Is that to purchase all the programs? Is that what you mean?
Not as much the programs as every person that uses the server, accesses the server, has email on the server, requires a license by Microsoft. So there's multiple different licenses. Your normal CAL license, which just gives you access to a server, you have to pay for that. Your email CAL license, which gives you access to an email address. And then your remote CAL license, which gives you access to a remote desktop services, which is one of the new services we're going to try and use for the Keystone data software. We're going to try and use that so that the building people can use it in the field.
Okay.
So all of those require a license for each one.
And are those licenses indefinite? Like once you have them, you have them?
When you buy them outright, yes.
Is that what
But they do expire. So it's just like your computer at home. When your operating system goes out of date, they no longer provide updates for it. Your licensing works the exact same way.
And is there updates that need to be done often on the licenses?
No, the licenses themselves, just when you refresh a server. So we're jumping out of a 2011 small business server, is what we're going to be leaving, and we're jumping into 2019 server. So when you go to a new server, you have to buy new license CALs for each user. On top, so there's your operating system license, which is the operating system itself, plus the user license. So depending on the amount of users you have is the amount of licenses you need.
And I guess maybe this is a question more for staff. Are you finding that with what you have now that you're losing efficiency? Like,
We do find some challenges with the server. Matt can speak to some. I know Fire has some challenges with the server and accessing software from home, and that's an ongoing issue that we've had and Matt can discuss. From our end, like working from home and things like that, we do find that it's a slower server, I believe. Access to drives is slower. When we're here, I believe day-to-day operations is okay, but we do experience some challenges. I'll let Matt explain the Fire challenges, but certainly when you try to access from home, or if we try to increase more users, we do experience challenges.
Yeah, your day-to-day is always going to be the fastest when you're directly in the building. When you're at home, you're accessing from your internet to this internet back into the server, so you're going to be slower. In a cloud environment, your access will be the same, doesn't matter where you are. So based on your internet connection, because your internet connection at where the cloud is going to be as fast as it can possibly be. But based on your internet connection is how fast you're going to get there.
does that mean there's risk of it being slower when we're here in the building?
Not with the new internet connection that they just recently upgraded to.
Okay. Okay, thanks.
Thank you. Councillor Sapoulis?
Yes, a question on cloud security. How does it compare security-wise? Hacking, getting into the system, is it the same?
It's very similar. Right now you have a firewall appliance here that blocks anything coming into the system. You get a very similar firewall appliance on the cloud side. The cloud side is just a large data center.
Who provides the security on the cloud side? We
The
do?
cloud side is hosted, but it's hosted by HostedBiz, which is our partner, and their data center is secured by their firewalls.
We put in funds in our insurance program to pay for somebody breaking in and ransom. Do we still need that?
Yes, of course.
Okay. All right. The other question is on capacity. Currently, if there's a Freedom of Information request, your staff is asking counselors to troll through their emails to find that stuff. Is it easier now with this cloud base that you'll be able to do that and have a uniform approach to what gets provided?
I think, yeah, Matt.
No, it's not. It's not going to be any easier in that sense. We need to add an additional layer on to make those Freedom of Information acts accessible to all. Right now, it involves granularly going through each mailbox. There's another layer that we need to add in that would basically filter all email through this layer and then to your email, making an archive, per se, of every email that comes in and out that cannot be deleted and cannot be changed by a user.
All right, well, that's an extra cost. Okay.
Yeah, that'll be an additional layer that will be added on when we figure out which way they want to go with it.
Okay, I guess a question for staff. Do you foresee any operating cost savings or cost avoidance by doing it this way? The recommended way?
Mary, do you want to take that, and then I want to add something?
Yeah. So there won't be the initial upfront cost exactly how Matt indicated, but over time, the operating costs do increase going with this option. But what types of operating cost savings are you indicating?
Staff time?
Nina can probably.
There will be. I'm not sure how quantifiable that is, but I do think that it would be easier to work on the server, but I don't think it's a huge quantifiable savings.
I think, and perhaps Matt can correct me if I'm wrong, but I think it's the overall functionality in terms of, I think Matt gave the perfect example with respect to, first of all, staff's ability to access information, not just here, but anywhere. So even if you're looking at from a disaster recovery point of view, you have that capability off-site, readily available off-site. And also as you move forward with the use of technology, which we want to do within the building department and have them have that functionality out in the field, this helps move us forward in that regard.
Yeah, easily in just disaster recovery sense of it, if this building were to catch on fire or blow up, in 2 hours I could have most of the staff working out of the community center down the road.
That's all the questions I have.
Councillor Roth?
Thank you. This is a little out of my realm of expertise, but if I'm hearing right around the questions, this is necessary for the building department to do on-site stuff, is that? We don't do this, we can't do that with the building department?
The building departments will work whether we do a local server or a cloud server.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, the technology isn't different between the two, it's just the location and the ability to run from a cloud location rather than trying to house it all here. But the setup of the servers, the setup of the software we're going to use, it's going to be the same.
But can I just elaborate on that? We would have to purchase a cloud-based option through Keystone, right?
No, they dropped their ideas for Keystone.
But
the cloud-based is the one I'm going to design for you, which is the remote desktop abilities of Keystone and Firehouse.
But I guess the question was, how would the building department outside of the office be able to enter their inspections into Keystone without a cloud option?
It'll be still VPN.
Okay.
It'll be a VPN connection just like you guys would use from home.
Okay. That's all the questions I have.
Okay. Well, I have a few questions. So if we have catastrophic fire in this building and our servers are, if they go up in flames, we lose absolutely everything. Is that correct? Or is there a backup?
Oh, you're backed up right now.
Okay.
Like right now, your off-site backups right now go to the cloud data center that we are proposing you to go to.
So they're already backed up in the cloud, but now
Yep.
you're just going to take the physical server.
I'm going to take the
out of
physical
here.
server out of here, because restoring from a backup, if you're physical, requires getting more physical, right? So I would need to bring hardware in, set up that hardware, restore your backup to it.
It's just more time consuming.
It's more time consuming, and your expense would be there, right? You'd have to buy all
That's
your
if
new
there's a
servers.
catastrophic failure. So
Yep.
this is we're planning for the future. Also, we're talking a lot about the off-site access, but I was recently traveling and I had access to the computers already
Yep.
here. So that's not a new service we'll be providing with the
No,
cloud. It's
VPN,
just- it's
VPN is something you guys have been using for years.
so that's
Just slightly different way of connecting it.
okay. Yeah, those are my only two concerns are that actually if somebody hacks us, so if it's cloud-based, they can hack our service, it can shut down. It's the same thing, just bring the new server in and load it on, and then we're back in business in a week. How long would it take you if we had a hack and we have the server?
If you had a hack to the point that we would deem all your data gone,
Yeah,
it would take us, you could use the existing server, because a hack doesn't break a server.
Okay.
Right? It just breaks the data on the server. So we just wipe out the data on the other server, move your backup onto it.
okay, so I guess I have a question for
It's for-
staff is, I'm hearing that it's going to provide efficiencies, and so is it just slow getting the information off the servers? And at my employer, we have licenses, and if so many people log in, then that's it, we have 12. If you need 13, is that the situation you're encountering? Is that you can't use the services fast, or?
Yeah, no, it's not that they're not at a licensing problem right now. Their problem is just the amount of people here with the speed and age of the equipment that's currently here. Because it's older and because the building has grown, there's a lot of people here.
When we get the new equipment, won't that improve that situation?
Of course.
42,000?
Yeah, yeah. Whether it's a cloud equipment or it's a physical equipment, you're both going to see a performance increase out of it.
But any additions to the physical server would require new hardware
New
equipment
hardware.
purchases, whereas a cloud-based server, if we do require expansions, it's a quicker, faster addition.
If you think of it this way, when I build a physical server, if I'm trying to forecast growth that I can't
Yeah.
quantify exactly, right? So I'm trying to build it a little bit bigger, but not going way out of budget on it. But any growth that goes beyond that requires actual hardware to be put into it.
This might be too vague of a question, but how much is it to extend the server per se? So if we go 42,000, the one option, 2.5 years down the road, we need more room. Is it $42,000, or is it, because it's a physical server, so are we talking hard drives?
You're talking about hard drives, you're talking about processing speed and stuff like that.
So out of that 42,000, that one option, how much of that is for the hardware?
Hardware itself, do you remember off the top of your head? I would probably say around 15 to 16,000. A good portion of it is licensing, and then labor. But yeah, probably hardware-wise, you're probably 15, 16,000. I'd have to look at the detailed quote to get it.
So, if we opt for the 42,000, and then if we wanted to double our hardware, we'd only be at 57,000 in the 5-year term versus 100. So, I thank you. I appreciate your answers. Yeah, I think I'd be in favor of unless staff can really, persuade me to go with the cloud base. I think that if the hardware isn't a significant portion of that 42,000, that going forward, if we need to expand, it might be a little bit slower. I understand that it's not as fast as cloud based, which is ideal.
Another one thought of is the cloud-based email that was on that quote as well.
Okay.
So right now, your email's hosted here, and if you went with your physical solution, your email would still be hosted here. Your cost per person to add licensing to that is probably about $180 an email address when you get in your CAL. So every time you're adding a person to your email address, you're getting that. Not to mention, if the internet ever goes down here, everyone, no matter if they're in the building or not in the building, loses access to email.
Whereas with a cloud server, if you're out anywhere outside of the building, you can access
You
the
have full
server. So if we
access.
go to the PCC to work for a few hours, we have access to our server with the cloud-based option, which you do not have with the physical option.
does the staff know how many occurrences of internet outages has happened?
We had one last year, I believe it was,
for 2 days?
which shut us down for 2 days, and we didn't have access to our drives or anything like that. Because ours is not fiber, like it's not cables that are under the ground, it's above ground. So anytime if there's a bad weather situation, then it does leave you susceptible to the internet going out for a few days and not being able to access the server. So it happened, I've been here for 2.5 years, happened once, but again, it's all weather dependent.
Thank you, Matt.
Sure.
Councillor Mulmer?
Could we, I have a question about the VoIP, which also mentions OnServe, if we could discuss that
Sure.
at this time, would that
I'll
be?
jump out for VoIP because we bought our VoIP guy.
Invite the VoIP guy down to the table.
We should make a decision on these once they're finished.
Thank you.
Shall I?
Yeah, go ahead,
Oh,
Councillor.
super. Thank you so much for coming. I just noticed, I like the idea of VoIP. I know several organizations have moved a lot of their communications that way. And I like the fact it's going to maintain at least one landline, I think I read, for emergency calls. And as we heard, you know, if the internet goes down for 2 days, we wouldn't have phones. But I guess I noticed in there that the VoIP service would be through OnServe. Is that correct? So that if we change providers, we'd have to change VoIP providers as well?
Sorry, I'm just going to join up.
Yeah, thanks.
Okay, that's
It's a sales question.
That's more of a sales question. Okay, so we actually partner with ZipTel, okay, which is where Andrew's from. And no, so if you no longer are partnered with OnServe for your managed services, you can still have the VoIP services separate.
Okay.
It's a different part of our business. We have the managed services, we have our VoIP, we have backup solutions, we have several different solutions.
And it wouldn't be a major issue if the contract went to someone else who didn't want to use ZipTel. It's just like switching from Rogers to Bell or something. It's
That's exactly it.
largely seamless, so it's not a big difference.
Nope, not a big difference at all. The solution that we provide is a hosted solution, so you don't have the upfront cost of purchasing any server hardware or anything like that here on site. Everything is hosted in the cloud. You don't have to worry about anything at all.
So just, I guess maybe you can answer, this would eliminate a lot of long-distance costs, is that
Yeah,
one of the
it's
primary things?
unlimited North America wide, so there's no long distance cost at all.
Right, so I couldn't find it in our base budget increase report, the numbers for that. Is that in there?
Yes.
Okay.
So there's a comparison, it's on page 44 of 202 of the addendum agenda, but there's a comparison of the current costs based on the various lines that we have with Bell Canada, and the VoIP proposed costs based on the number of users that we currently have.
Okay, super.
Okay?
Thanks. Thank you.
So I have a question. With the VoIP service, it's very dependent on the internet as well.
Yes.
So if we lose internet, we're also losing phone. Where our current system, we're still the old way of, or copper wires, Bell.
Yep.
So that's the only concern that we would have, is that if we lose internet, if we have a blackout, even power outage, then
The
we're-
one thing with the VoIP solution, though, we can, if you do lose internet, we can forward off to your landline, we can forward off to cell phones, we can forward it off that way. And it's not really dependent on your internet connection here. Yes, the physical phones here will not work, but if someone leaves you a voicemail, you'll get it in your email. So you can actually click on it on your phone and listen to it, or click on it on your computer and listen to it. There's several different options, which are great. If your bell lines go down here, which tends to happen, especially when there's a lot of construction going on, you're out until they fix the line.
Okay.
Yes, I'd like to understand this. Members of council, option A, annual ongoing cost of $1,600. What is that all about?
I can speak more to that. Okay. So I've provided that separately because currently members of council don't have their own phone line with the township. And I believe we were directed to look into this further. So option A is basically to be able to make outgoing calls and incoming calls, utilizing an application, even like from home. The other option is only voicemail to email access. So that's why it's a smaller price than the option A.
So that option A gives you the ability to send and receive calls from your computers. Okay?
What do staff prefer? What's their recommendations? Status quo or this, and why?
I think in terms of the phones, we're at capacity. We really challenged that we cannot add any lines, and even council was requesting, and we were very challenged. So I think in terms of the physical, we're really at we've capped the usage. So I think we need to explore the option of VoIP, and I believe from our aspect we would recommend it.
Are the annual costs likely to go up?
So based on my analysis of our current number of lines versus what we're proposing with our current number of users, because VoIP is based on users and there's an extension cost for each user, it would actually result in operational cost savings. Because if you see in the on page 46 of the addendum agenda, so the current costs in 2018 were approximately $16,000. And what's being proposed with VoIP is $13,540, but that also includes the monthly phone rental costs, so we wouldn't have to purchase the phones up front. And it also includes the extension costs for our current users. There's also an initial one-time setup cost of $500. And then those options have been provided for members of council.
Thank you.
Councillor Bulmer?
I want to clarify. I think I heard we get our internet service over the phone line. Yes? No. You are currently, is that right?
No, you switch to Rogers Ignite. It's a cable line.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
So that it is separate right now. It used to be that we got it over the phone line.
It used to be
All right.
valid. Yeah.
Yes.
All right.
But it's still hardwired. Like it's the Rogers is a hardwired cable to the building.
Understood.
It's not wireless or LTE
No.
technology or anything.
But if one goes down, I think the deputy clerk said over here that we're down for 2 days because the internet was down for 2 days because the phone line went, because the...
Sorry, not phone line, the cables, but the internet went down a year ago for 2 days, yes. So it shut off the internet.
In that case, the phones would go down too. My other question, I guess, would be on I read in one of the reports, we currently have 6 lines dedicated for emergency management.
Yes. And it's for the council chambers should the EOC be activated.
Right. And how effective is, we'd replace those with VoIP, or would they be those would be the 6 lines that be retained as landlines, or how does that work?
So it's recommended that each building have one analog line. And we've had preliminary discussions with Linda Dixon from the county. She's indicated 2 analog lines in the municipal office to deal with an emergency.
Okay.
But that's just been our preliminary discussions. We will, right now, the budget assumes 2 analog lines in this municipal office.
Okay.
Okay?
As recommended by Linda, as the county recommended. Okay.
At this time, yeah.
Councillor Spoulos?
Question, does the county have VoIP, or are they still on analog lines? Or are they planning to move to VoIP?
I'm not sure if the county is on VoIP.
I don't know whether the county is. I know that one of the recent municipalities that went to VoIP was Centre Wellington, and they went on to VoIP about a year ago.
Yes, and we did get a lot of feedback from Centre Wellington because they just recently implemented VoIP from their IT team there, and so we've discussed with OnServe about their capabilities and whether this system would have similar types of capabilities, and based on our discussions, it would. So it was really nice to get the input from the IT team at Centre Wellington just through their implementation with VoIP.
Thank you.
Any further questions? None? Okay, thank you very much for your...
So if you want to just ask council if someone wants to put a motion on the floor, whether to deal with the cloud-based item first.
So I'm just going to ask council if anybody would like to put a motion on the floor to deal with the cloud-based servers at this time.
motion is to stay with the current setup on the basis that's a least cost alternative.
I'll second that.
Okay. All in favor? I favor that. Carried. Sure.
Just on that, if I can just seek clarification from Mary, does that mean that there has to be a transfer into the capital forecast
Yes,
of that amount?
exactly.
Okay, thank you.
Yep.
Okay.
Take it out of roads.
I'd like to invite Chief,
Congratulations.
yes. I'd also like to ask council if there was a motion on the floor to accept the voice over internet protocol, also known as VoIP.
I'll make the motion to go with the VoIP system.
Do we have a seconder? Jessica, go ahead. All in favor? All right. All right, I'll invite Chief Gomes and come down and make his presentation. Thank you, guys. Okay.
Your Worship and members of council, I'm here to discuss our proposed satellite fire station and the costs associated with that. Report number 2018-005. What I'll do is I'll just give you the background information really quickly, then the recommendations, and then if you want me to read further into the report, I can do so, or just answer questions at that time. Is that okay that I proceed? Okay. So the background to this report is that on September 27th of last year, the fire department was requested by council to look into the costs associated with a West End fire station. And the report was brought forward last year, and it was deferred to this capital budget cycle of 2019. So the recommendation is that this report, 2018-005, with respect to the costs associated with the proposed satellite fire station, be received for information, and that council approves the purchase of land in 2019 at a cost of $400,000, and that would be funded as follows: $80,000 through tax levy, $320,000 through DC charges or development charges. And that council approves the purchase of the building and associated equipment at a cost of $741,750 in 2020, and that would need to be funded through a tax levy or debenture. Also, that council authorizes the discontinuation of the fire protection agreement with the City of Cambridge in 2021, which is currently funded through a special area tax levy, a 2018 cost of $137,800 to the ratepayers of that area. Also, that council approves a tax levy increase of $62,347 in the Fire and Rescue Services operating budget commencing 2021 as outlined. Operational costs of $85,243, and cost recoveries associated with servicing what would be a newly assumed portion of the 401 would be $22,896. And that's the recommendation. Did you want me to read further into the report or just answer questions?
I think we all had a chance to read the report. I think I'll open it up to questions. Chief Gomes, Councillor Balmer, do you have any questions for?
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chair. Good morning.
Morning.
You know, I couldn't help when I appreciate all the background information that was in there, and in many ways, this is kind of like our own little Highway 6 bypass when you see how long it's been talked about. But there was a couple things that stood out in your report I wanted to get a better understanding of that I didn't realize before, despite how many times we've talked about this. And one of them was, I think you mentioned in your report that Cambridge does not have Superior Tank Shuttle certification, is it accreditation or certification? And Is that, does that mean they don't have a tanker, or they don't have the same number of tankers, or why is that?
That's a very good question. Because they're an urban fire service, they've never sought out for that accreditation. They didn't feel it was necessary to provide the service to the Cambridge residents by doing so. What that means for us is the service that they provide through the fire protection agreement does not have a provision in there where they require water shuttle accreditation. Therefore, our ratepayers in the area do not receive an insurance discount.
So they're paying this extra area rating, but they're not getting the same level of service that you might get in Aberfoyle.
That's correct, because right now we do have that accreditation. We just received it this year, and it's good for 5 years.
But of course, that doesn't cover the entire township.
That's correct. So what it covers is up to an 8-kilometer radius from an existing fire hall.
Okay, so would it automatically, if we built the second fire hall, would it automatically extend over there, or you'd have to redo the certification?
It would automatically extend over there as long as we kept our level of firefighters and apparatus the same or higher than it is right now when we receive that accreditation. We would also have to find a location for the fire station that would encompass most of the ratepayers in that area so that they could receive this special insurance rating.
Okay, so to go back to my first question then, they do have the same number, they have the same kind of number of tankers showing up, it's just they don't have the practice, or they don't have the same number of tankers. Does it come down to the number of tankers, or training, or the?
It's a combination of the above. So the apparatus that you do have, the firefighters responding, the level of training, and then proving that you can provide that level of service through an audit. So they physically bring somebody out to perform that audit. Right now, Cambridge has only 1 tanker, where Puslinch has 2. Within the city boundaries of Cambridge, they have pressurized water sources, which means they have hydrants throughout the city. So having a tanker isn't a big concern for them as much as it is for us here, where we don't have that water supply available to us.
Okay, so if they've got a tanker and they've got hydrants, do they staff it to keep that tanker ready to go if we need it, or is it just? I can't imagine if I was the city of Cambridge, I'd keep staff sitting there waiting for us to call, but do they?
Yeah, that's a good question. So what they do is they have a very interesting staffing policy for that tanker. So when they have a mechanic on staff during the day, that mechanic will leave the mechanical duties and jump on that tanker if it's requested for a response.
Oh.
And that tanker does respond to areas within Cambridge, such as the 401, that would not have access to a hydrant. And it's also used as a blocker for those incidents. In the evening, what they do is they don't man it unless their minimum staffing is above minimum. If so, they will man it with 1 firefighter. But if they're at minimum staffing levels, what they do is they will pull firefighters from another piece of apparatus to staff the tanker if it needs to respond.
Okay, thank you. Let's see. Okay, you mentioned that the super tanker shuttle accreditation, or superior, I'll learn that one day.
That's fine.
It's 8 kilometers, and it would extend to that new site as long as we maintain the staffing and everything. I'm trying to think. So how far would I think they recommended Site C. So Site C, I believe, was at the corner of 10 and 2. Side Road 10, because it was probably the GRCA lands there. So would that extend? It would include all of the existing coverage area, and then and possibly extend north of 401 as well.
That's correct. So my assumption, I could get you exact data, but it would cover all the way down to Gore Road and then up to the Speed River at the north end.
Oh, so
and
right
Laird
past
Road.
Laird. Okay.
Yes.
I think there was a map in there. I just couldn't. I couldn't see the map. So. And then we'll also extend east then to fill in the gaps between here and there, but
yes,
reduce the number of areas that don't. Okay.
Exactly, but our the population density in that area is based around the lake, so definitely the majority of our ratepayers would receive the discounted insurance rates by having a satellite station near Pusswinch Lake.
So that's based on, I'm sorry, Mr. Chair, that's my last question. This is 8 kilometers of travel distance or 8 kilometers as the crow flies? Just I'm thinking of Side Road 10 north to 401. You know, by the time you come down and around and back.
That's a very good question. I'd have to read the terms of the certification and get a better understanding on that, on whether it's a true distance of 8 kilometers or response. I would gather that it would be response would be my guess, so taking the roadways to get to certain areas to service properties or people of that area.
Super. Not that I'm suggesting a bridge over the 401 at the 10th. Just wanted to clarify that. Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Councillor Goya?
Yeah, sorry, I might have a lot of questions.
That's fine.
I haven't had a long working relationship with the fire department as of yet. I do hope to be spending a lot more time there in the next little while, but my experience with the fire department is that they're an incredibly proud group, and that they do take a lot of ownership in providing the best possible protection to the township. And I can definitely see how this satellite station would work to keep morale high, which I think it showed that it did in the trial satellite station that you did, as well as improve protection to the township. But I have some questions as it relates to the cost of things. My first question, I guess, is to do with the purchase of the land, and that ultimately it will require an acre and a half to 2 acre parcel of land, and the preferred site was at the 2nd and the 10th. And I believe there was a appraisal done by Irvine and Associates, which we haven't seen yet, to suggest that we can obtain that land for approximately $400,000. My experience in my other life is that that is not likely the case, and so I'm wondering if is it private land that's looking to be purchased, or is there a specific site already in mind that we know that this is a realistic number to work off of?
I can't speak to how they attain their appraisal. I think they looked at comparables in the area and determined that amount based on that. We would entertain purchasing land from private owners, from regionally owned property, provincially owned property. For instance, as Councillor Matthew alluded to, the GRCA owns a lot of property in that area. There might be an opportunity there to purchase some property off them. The MTO has a piece of property closer to Town Line Road. There might be an opportunity there, and we would definitely look at any avenues that we could to save any land costs.
Okay. And the only reason I asked that is because the majority of the land purchase is being funded through the fire services development charges, but once this $320,000 has been used, there's not a whole lot left in that. I think it's $37,000. So it makes me a little bit nervous because it doesn't seem like there's a whole lot of room for error, and I just know from personal experiences over the last several months that there have been 1 acre parcels selling for well over $500,000, and we need 2 acres. So I'm a little bit nervous about that number. And I know there's an appraisal, and I am not trying to doubt the appraisal. I just wondered if there was more to it that I wasn't understanding. My second question is about the in here where we're looking to discontinue the fire protection agreement with the City of Cambridge in 2021, and I'm wondering if would it not make more sense to acquire the land first and negotiate build contract before we agree to discontinue that service with Cambridge?
Yes, so my apologies if there was a misunderstanding there. We would definitely not discontinue our fire protection agreement with Cambridge until we had a fully functioning fire station at that location.
Okay. Okay. I think that's all my questions for right now. Thanks.
Councillor Spoulos?
I'm concerned about a proper assessment done cost-wise. I agree with Councillor Goya on the land cost. It's close to $500,000 an acre. That's what I'm hearing as well through the grapevine. That's one part of it. The second part of it was there was a comment made from a chartered accountant firm that could not validate the costing associated with this fire station. And did you have a proper engineering plans done to validate the costing of this particular facility?
So I wasn't part of the process when it came to gathering information in regards to building a satellite station, and that was prepared prior to the master fire plan, and so that the information was received in that master fire plan. So when it comes to costing, I would have to speak to the former fire chief to find out how they determined the costs associated with that. As far as an engineering plan, I don't think they had an exact design for the fire station yet. Size was recommended through the master fire plan, and some facilities, but that was all. The only time I've ever heard an engineering plan coming forward would be if we were to utilize an existing space at McClintock's, and that would be for that assessment at that time, but that was to spend quite a bit of money on somebody else's property and in their building. And at the time of the report in September 27th of 2017, I was against that recommendation.
Next question. What are the other options we looked at to see if we can partner with either North Dumfries or with Guelph Hermosa? Has that been exhausted?
Yes, it has. So I spoke to Chief Schatz. He's the fire chief for North Dumfries. They have not and have no future plans to consider fire station in that portion of North Dumfries, and would not entertain a joint fire station there, which would be our southwest corner of the township. With Guelph Hermosa, presently they are developing a master fire plan, and we will look at opportunities there. But speaking to Chief John Osborne, he doesn't foresee there being any opportunities at our northwest corner of our township because there's a real lack of population in Guelph Hermosa that they service in that corner of their township.
Next question. What are the ramifications if we don't do anything for the next 3-4 years?
Well, obviously that's council's decision. So what would occur is we would just continue on with the fire protection agreement through Cambridge in that area. As long as they choose to provide that service to us, there's always the opportunity where they might decide that they do not want to provide that service to us. Maybe they don't see the value in it. Maybe they have a certain situation with their union that might get them to change the present situation that we have with the city of Cambridge. The other concern I do have is that north of the 401 up to Laird Road and the Speed River is an area where our response times are really, really high because we're responding from the Aberfoyle fire station. So right now we have in that area, which is basically Town Line Road to the Speed River, Laird Road, Side Road, 10 north of the 401, an area that has 627 residents that we presently provides service to. That being said, if we were to look at the opportunity of extending our fire protection agreement area to that area that I just discussed, those area residents would be looking at a special area tax levy of approximately $120,000 based on 2018 rates.
I understand what you're saying, but at the same time, the east part of our township is severely underserved as well. So how do you weigh that decision to service more the northwest part compared to, say, the southeast part or the central east part?
Right. So that consideration is based solely on the fact that there's a special area tax levy to the residents right now of the West End.
That's all the questions I've got, but I'm concerned about the costing of this. I think if we're going to do this, we have to have proper assessment done, engineering-wise, property-wise, and then go out to the public and say, this is what it is, and this is how we intend to fund it. So I can't support it moving forward at this time until such time we have proper information and we've gone out to the public and informed them and we got their feedback on this.
Okay. Thank you. Councillor Ruth? Roth, sorry. You do.
I have a lot of questions.
Okay.
I want to thank you for your report. It's very thorough and there's a lot of history there. But before I can make a decision of this magnitude, I have to have a lot more information. Now, according to our fire master plan, this was only suggested if council makes it a decision to enhance services. I don't think council has made that decision. I think council should make that decision. That's one point. And if you read our responsibilities for fire service, it's based on our needs and circumstances. To me, that's the most gray statement. I have no idea what it means, but I would think not being able to afford something would be a circumstance. I don't know if that's the way this is meant, so I would have to have that question answered. The NFPA 1720 recommendation, it isn't law to my understanding. Is that correct?
That's correct. So those are international standards that the fire service tries to achieve.
Okay. So reading that, in a rural area, we have to have 6 men in 14 minutes for a structure fire. Is that correct?
That's correct for rural areas.
Okay. And then they get into talking about demand zones. Do we have different demand zones in the township? Or could we have?
I can't answer that at this time. I'd have to get some information on that.
Because they talk about urban areas, suburban areas, rural areas, and then there's another demand zone that states that if the structure is more than 8 miles from the fire station, then the only stipulation is travel time. I don't know what that means. And then you got to reach that goal 90% of the time. But I think it requires 4 men, but everything else is just based on travel time. I don't know what that means, but I'd like to know.
Do you want me to define travel time? Or
I think I know what travel time is, but I'm not sure what they're referring to. Because in the other zones, in the other demand zones, they're specifically saying you should have this many men in this much time.
Right.
Right? In this one, they don't. They just say it's just, so it basically sounds to me like there's really no regulations. We just get there as fast as we can with as many men as we can. I don't know.
Okay. I think they determine demand zones by the population density within a certain area. Is that correct?
They may.
Okay. Well, let me look into that, and then I'll get that information for you.
And the reason I say that is because in 2004, the Ontario Fire Marshal recommended 10 men and 10 minutes for an urban area, for our urban areas. But do we really have urban areas? Now, I know this was in 2004, so maybe it doesn't mean anything. But then they also go on to say that we just have to provide the best possible service in our rural areas. I don't know what that means. Like, everything to me is just so gray, and yet we base all our response times and the number of men that we send based on what we should be doing for a structure fire. Structure fires are one thing, but other calls are another thing. So do we need to have that same time frame for all our other calls? Or just structure fires? Another gray area. You talk about the motor vehicle collisions on the 401 and say it'll produce, I think, $22,000 in revenue. But you don't say in there what it costs us to send those trucks and men. If they're sitting in the hall, they're not costing us anything. So that would have to come off that price. And I'd like to know what it costs us to do that.
Did you want me to answer that question now?
Sure.
Okay. So when it came to operating costs, we did have costs listed that would be incurred by our existing staff and any new staff that are added to that fire department. So it was listed in operating costs, and then that was listed on the recommendation portion of the report, less those recoveries that we would receive from the 401.
Okay, then I missed that. But according to our fire master plan, our per capita cost for fire protection is $100.42. I'd like to know how that would change if we had a satellite station. And in 2014, we had 25.9 people per square kilometer. I don't know how that relates to the NFPA regulations or recommendations.
Did you want me to speak to that?
Sure.
Okay. So rural is classified as a population density of 500 people or less per square mile. So based on that number that you just gave me, we would be classified as rural.
Rural.
Yes. So when we're looking at demand zones, we would be looking at that as well. Okay. Your previous figure of 142, could you just explain that again, please? That was per capita?
In the Fire Master Plan, they stated that in 2014, our per capita cost for fire protection is $100.42 per capita.
Okay.
And I would like to know how that changes if we had a satellite station.
All right. I'll just elaborate on that right now. So the per capita cost that you gave me of 142, I assume it incorporates capital expenditures as well for the fire service, because my determination as far as the per capita cost when it comes to operating costs is $89 per capita, which in turn Cambridge is charging us approximately $200 per capita. So when I was looking at costs associated to just operating costs, we were considerably less than 50% of what Cambridge presently charges. But I would have to find out exactly how the 142 came about as a per capita cost. Once again, I'm assuming that was because capital expenditures were added to that.
Okay, but that's fine. But then if that's the case, then the capital cost for the new satellite station would also have to be included. So I would think that would increase by quite a...
Yes, and we could try and base some figures on the assumed costs of a satellite station and the equipment associated to provide those services.
Okay. And also in somewhere in the report I noticed talked about a fire on Ellis Road that they were going to get the fire marshal's office to investigate. I remember that fire, but it said in there that there would be a report back from the fire marshal in late 2017, I think. Did we ever get that report?
To my knowledge, we did not. At the time, Fire Chief Good did make that request. I do remember him saying so, and I do remember him saying that the OFM was not going to produce that report for us because they had produced previous reports in the past for that response area.
Okay, I don't know what that means. Does that mean they just give up on us, or what? Like, I thought okay, I don't know what to.
I'm just repeating what I remember Chief Good stating.
Okay. I would have thought if you called in the fire marshal, they would do a report and they would give us a copy of that report. But anyway, I guess that's not the case.
I do know that they have very limited resources at this time, and they prioritize the needs of certain communities and the requests. And I guess based on previous reports submitted for the same nature, they declined Chief Good's request.
Okay. The real reason for this satellite station, is it response times? Is it cost savings? Is it, what is the number one reason for a satellite station?
Okay. Right now, for the area affected by the special area tax levy and the fire protection agreement, I feel that they receive very good fire protection services from the city of Cambridge. They are a full-time department. Our response times cannot match their response times. However, that being said, we have another portion of our municipality that presently isn't provided with that same service, and our response times to that area are very long. So our average response times when we did our last research paper were 18 to 19 minutes. That was the average across the municipality. As you mentioned, we need to shoot for 14-minute response time to every area of our municipality. And to do so, we either need to extend the fire protection agreement area north of the 401 to the west end, or build a satellite station at the west end. The other advantage is, as I mentioned, if Cambridge ever decides they don't want to provide that service to us, we have to look at other opportunities. And having a satellite station in place then would be an opportunity, or if we have one in place, then that's not a consideration any longer. Also, we are, as Councillor Supoulos alluded to, looking and should be looking into other opportunities at other portions of our municipality, and we will wait for the master fire plan recommendations from Guelph Aramosa to see how we can improve service to the eastern portion of our township as well.
That was going to be another question of mine, because our response times can't be meeting the requirements in ARCO, for example.
That's correct.
So if we build a satellite station for the west end, why would we not have to build one for the east end? Aren't we kind of, you know, we got to do it here, we also have to do it there, maybe in the south, so ideally we would have 4 or 5 departments.
Yes, so we would have to address that situation when the time comes. So if we're looking at response times, that is the criteria to determine where satellite stations should go. The reason we're addressing the west end, as I mentioned previously, is because of that special area tax levy that's currently in place.
But that special area of tax levy is something those people in that area chose to do. And, you know, by putting the satellite station in, it's only a cost savings to them, it's an expense to the rest of the township. I mean, that has to be taken into consideration. And I know that's a very contentious issue, and I don't probably agree with that. I think that tax levy should be spread out over the entire municipality.
I agree.
But I think it would have to be phased in over a number of years. That isn't going to answer it'll answer some of it. But my big concern here is that we're talking about people's lives. And I think as a municipality, I'm sure there's a lot of other municipalities far worse off than we are for fire protection. And should we not be, as a municipality, trying to talk to AMO or the fire chiefs or to get legislation that the closest fire department has to respond to a structure fire?
I think that would be a very prudent request, for sure. Right now, I won't say all, most fire departments in the province of Ontario are municipally owned or funded, and looking at the opportunity of having one large provincial fire department, to me, that makes sense. That way you do have the closest fire department and closest resources delivering that service.
But even if, for example, Cambridge, Guelph, Milton, Hamilton answered a structure fire in our municipality, we could pay them for that service, and it would still be cheaper than building all these satellite stations, which still isn't going to get the same response time. And again, we're talking people's lives. How important are people's lives? So I think there's such a strong argument for this to be put into legislation, and I think our township should start that somehow. And I would lean on our expert staff to help me out on that. I've taken up a lot of time, so I'm going to shut up now. I appreciate your report, and this is a huge expense for the township. And again,
I understand.
I agree with previous comments that I am very doubtful we'll buy land for that price. Unless it's maybe in Cambridge, I don't know. But anyway, thank you.
You're welcome.
Thank you, Councillor Roth. I share Council's concerns with the cost of the land, but in the initial report, even at $400,000, there was a timeline that it would pay for itself. So say if it were a 10-year project, the projected cost savings, if we buy it at $800,000, it would be 20 years and it would finally pay for itself. So I think there's savings to be had there, but 2 acres of land in Puslinch is very valuable. Now, one thing, the citizens in that jurisdiction, if we put a satellite station, are they going to be aware that, I don't want to word this improperly, but they're going to get a less timely service? Because how long does it take Cambridge Fire to respond to that area?
12.
I'd have to look at the response times, but definitely they try and target their emergency call response time within the city of Cambridge to 4 to 5 minutes maximum for the first arriving vehicle. Out there, we might be adding a couple more minutes to the response time. That being said, as I alluded to, them, as far as fire service response times go, they're achieving probably the best response times with the option that they currently have in place with a full-time department responding to their needs, because their staff is at the hall at the time of the call, where our staff would have to leave their workplace or their home to go to the fire hall, then attend that emergency.
And that's why I want to be clear with the constituents, is that, if you call 911 right now, that there's going to be, in that area, there's going to be a fire truck there in 7-10 minutes, whatever it may be. And this isn't a knock at the staff. It's just the nature of the beast. They have to drive to the hall. So we put a satellite station there. It's going to be 6-7 minutes to get to the station, get the truck, get to their house. So there is going to be a difference in service, but then you have to figure in the monetary aspect of it for the township. Also, so I have concerns about building an east station, a west station, and then having a central station. Has it ever been looked into to possibly move this fire hall to the east? I know that this staff and the works department, everybody's needs more room. Has it been investigated 2 stations instead of 3, and not have it centrally located here, which possibly could help response times? Then they're not coming through Aberfoyle, coming through Morrison to get to the, that's probably what slows your guys down a lot, is the congestion and the traffic. And another question I have is, have we approached the city of Cambridge and the city of Guelph if they're interested on a per capita basis of providing this fire protection for the east side of the township and the west? I know from my experience with the chiefs in the city, they're not interested in the $400 per truck kind of response. They, unfortunately, as Councillor Roth mentioned, it is people's lives, but they don't necessarily, they have to look out for their constituents as well. And I believe there might be an appetite. Maybe you could elaborate on that if you have any feelings that maybe the city be interested in expanding that western coverage on a per capita basis.
Sure. So a few things. I'll just step back a little bit. So staff was directed by council to look at these opportunities, and there was, I can't remember the report number, a report in 2016 where the CAO and the fire chief at the time approached the city of Guelph to see if this option was viable for them to provide service to our municipality for a fee. At that time, if I remember the report correctly, it appeared that they did not want to pursue this option. Financially, it didn't make sense for the city of Guelph to do so.
Now, was that as an automatic aid or was that per capita?
It was listed as automatic aid, but that was automatic aid for financial compensation. So there's a few different automatic aid plans that you can have in place. For instance, ours right now with Guelph Aramosa is for like services, which means they come out to assist us for structure fires. We reciprocate exactly the same way. So there's no money exchanged whatsoever. Guelph, we cannot reciprocate to Guelph, so we were looking at that type of compensation from them. Also, Cambridge was approached through the previous fire chief on a cost basis to respond to structure fires only. Their cost was at $3,000 per hour per truck, responding 6 vehicles to a structure fire in our area. So we're talking $18,000 per hour per structure fire that they would respond to. Where that's ended up, I'm not sure. I don't know if that was presented to council. It was, sorry, CAO.
Yeah, that information was presented to council, and at that time it was determined to continue with the contract that we currently have in place with Cambridge.
And just then to further answer your question on a per capita basis, I did approach the fire chief in the city of Cambridge asking if they would be willing to extend the fire protection agreement north of the 401 to the area previously discussed, which would be Town Line Road, the Speed River, Laird Road, Side Road 10 north, so everything north of the 401 there within that boundary. This is only in principle a verbal acknowledgement that they would entertain the possibility of providing that service at the same per capita fee, which is projected at next year being $202 per resident in that area to our municipality. And as I mentioned previously, we have 627 residents in that area, so that would be approximately $120,000 over and above our existing fire protection agreement.
$250,000 to do the entire West End annually.
Versus 80.
Projected for next year, I think, is approximately, it's 148,000 and something. So you add the 120 to that.
Okay, now with that first response, is that strictly house fires, or do they go to medical calls for that first hour?
That's a good question. So the contract states it's for like services being the same services that they presently provide to the residents of the city of Cambridge.
Have they been responding to medical calls in the Postage Lake area? Are you aware of that?
Yes. So they respond to their fire service that they provide to our municipality is exactly the same service that they provide to the municipality of Cambridge. Including medical responses, open air burning complaints, basically everything for the first hour.
I am also in favor, as council has mentioned here, of the entire tax base absorbing the that special levy. The people that agreed to that levy probably don't even live there anymore. It was put back in place in the 70s. So I mean, when you buy a house, you inherit some things. That's currently, I think the system is a good buy. That it's great service from the city of Cambridge. It helps us out. So also, as Councillor Roth mentioned, I think it would have to be graduated in. I don't think we can take it all in one big swap. But I'm struggling with, you know, this. We're forgetting about the east side right now. We have fire response issues, not issues, but just things we need to deal with. The other concern I have with the satellite station is we're still dealing with staff responding to the station. Do we have staff living within 4 or 5 kilometers of this proposed satellite station location? And, you know, there's no guarantee that those people will, you know, move on in their life, or, you know, now they're responding from further out. So our response time still could potentially be an issue depending on staffing. It's very dependent on staffing and where they're coming from. Is that a fair statement?
It's a very fair statement. So at the time, the firefighters that we had residing in the area of a proposed satellite station were 11. Right now, off the top of my head, I think we probably have 6. We are hiring at this time. Right now, we're proposing to hire auxiliary firefighters from a certain proximity to our existing fire hall, and we would do so for a satellite station. So right now we are allowed to hire non-residents of Puslinch, and we've been pulling people from the south end of Guelph. If we had a satellite station out towards the Cambridge border, we would look at the opportunity of doing the same with Cambridge residents.
So yeah, I just want to summarize it. I'd really like to know the per capita cost, if there's an appetite for it from Cambridge and possibly Guelph for the Arkell area. But I want to, you know, I really want to emphasize that it's not on a automatic aid agreement. From what I understand, there isn't an appetite for that. It's on the per capita. There might be a retainer, but I'd like to explore these options before we make a decision. And you know, and because we don't know the land cost associated with a satellite station, I really need to have that information as well before we move forward. But thank you for your presentation, and if council has any more questions, or
I do have one more question.
Sure.
If we were able to find a piece of land for $400,000, is there any value in exploring the option of purchasing the land now and perhaps setting aside some money every year from now till a year when maybe we can afford it, and continue the agreement with Cambridge until such time that we can afford building the fire station? Because the land isn't going to go down in value. But once the fire station is constructed on it, it's a very specialized property at that point in time. But it's because the majority of this fire station, the construction of the building itself is where the tax levy impact, the most substantial tax levy impact would be. Does it make sense to look for land, buy the land, and then just sit on it?
I think that's would be a great recommendation. As noted, the previous projected cost for land at the time that this was first proposed was $320,000, based on what the assumption of that land would be at that time if it was purchased. Whether or not we're allowed to do so is a different question, but I would think that that would be a very prudent investment. And if council ever decided to change the direction as far as a satellite station, then they would have the option to obviously sell that land and recoup the funds and any profit that was made accordingly.
Okay, thank you. All right. Moved by Councillor Sapoulis, seconded by Councillor Goya. That report, FIR 2018-005, with respect to the costs associated with the proposed satellite fire station, be received for information. All in favor? Okay. Now, is there any motions from the floor regarding the report that Chief Gomes?
Yeah, I'd like to suggest that we carry on by doing a proper assessment of the land value and the costing of the station. It keeps a good faith that we are doing this way, as pointed out earlier by Councillor Bulmer, that the operating costs associated with this satellite station is a lot less than the Cambridge agreement. So in the long run, I think we're going to be paying through the nose with Cambridge, not in the next 5 years, but in the next 10 years. So, and the burden on the residents is not something we want to keep transmitting to them. Mm-hmm. So that'd be my recommendation. We pursue this, and the second recommendation would be what Councillor Roth has suggested, that we try to pursue a legislative solution to the problem we're in. And had a third recommendation is for staff to look at how we can phase in the current levy to the rest of the tax base in a reasonable amount without causing a big hit, because the big hit right now would be probably somewhere in the order of 3% type of thing, and that's a big hit all at once.
Can just if I could just get some clarification and perhaps make a suggestion that we break it out in terms of what you're voting on in this regard. And if I may just add for council's information, the appraisal that was done, it was a report done by an appraiser, similar to what we had done when we did the Eagle Lane land transfer. So it wasn't a full-out appraisal, but I'm also going to suggest to council that you consider that as a base of information because the points made by members of council are very valid in terms of that's not necessarily what you're going to get a piece of land for, but it's think of it similar to MPAC in terms of the value of land is assessed at a certain value, but that's certainly not the value of land, what a person pays when they purchase a property. And if I might suggest, without incurring the cost for a full-out appraisal, perhaps we just take into consideration the report that we were provided, and we can give you some information, which I think we did pull at one time, that what the costs, the sale of property was for similar type properties in the municipality in a given current year, which would be this year, and we can bring that information back because I do believe that you probably do have to set aside additional funds above the 400,000. However, how much I think is going to have to be an estimate on council's part until we actually get into the process of looking at the actual purchase of land. So if I can just ask that the first, that we separate the votes out. So one had to do with obtaining more information, if I captured it correctly, on the cost to purchase land. And then I think I also did hear that could be included in this recommendation, the costs associated with the construction of the facility itself.
Design and construction, a proper assessment of the total cost associated with it. Because I think this $1 million is low in my learned experience.
And would you suggest that that's being prepared by an engineering firm?
Yes, absolutely.
Okay, so then when council's looking at that particular recommendation, there would have to be funding set aside for that purpose. And did you want us to report back to you before the next budget meeting on what that would cost? Okay.
Can I just say that that should also include, sorry. Can I just say that that should also, for the building component, that it also includes all the services, so like a new septic system.
No, the whole thing, the whole fit out. This has to be somebody saying this is a 10% design based on a fully serviced area.
I just want to make sure that.
Yeah, it'd be a hypothetical 1.5 acre place, and they would say, okay, this is what you need, bang, 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 all in, so there's no surprise for us.
Mm-hmm. Hydro service.
All in, everything, yeah.
Complete report. We need a seconder. Councillor Bulmer?
Just further, I like the first recommendation. I'll speak to them, try them one at a time here. On the costing of the land, I think Councillor Goyda has made an interesting point about doing our best to lock in that value, and Councillor Spoulis is correct in talking about finding out what that cost is, but keeping in mind that this is potentially either another level of governance property. Maybe we should also have discussions beyond just another assessment of the price on the private sector market. So what somebody might want to be able to sell it for a house might be different from whatever the process is to acquire land from the GRCA. Not that they would want to take substantially less than market value, but considering that a great deal of their funding comes from us, the more they sell the land to us for, the more we pay in a levy, or whatever. We're going to end up you know what I mean? We're sort of sharing a pocket with the GRCA. So perhaps we can explore that as part of your motion Councillor Sapoulis, would you be okay to have it that we, part of that include contacting the Conservation Authority? I think the chief also mentioned there are other agencies that may own land that may not be at exactly location C, but
We can do that as a standalone activity,
Yeah.
or ask the engineering firm to do it as part of their activity, so.
Well, you-
I'm easy either way.
yeah, just you had broken about the cost of the building out separate from the cost of the land.
That's fine.
And so I think in terms of cost of land, if we could have staff include in that, contacting the GRC to see what their process is. So, because I think there may be opportunities. I also think in a private piece of property, there may be opportunities. We're assuming that all of our citizens are going to want to take the maximum, when there may be opportunities for someone to get, if the township were able to sever 3 acres for someone and we kept 2 and they got 1 to sell, I think we can't always assume that the residents are going to be wholly, greedy on this. Some might want to do the right thing, and I don't want to discount that. But that's on the first one. And on the second point, just to also include Councillor Goyda's piece on the cost of the building, when we get those, I wouldn't want to lose sight of the recommendation that because that's the largest levy impact, that perhaps we show that over a couple of years, so that the first year we put half aside and the next year we build to reduce that impact. If we could look at that when we get those numbers as well, just to clarify those 2 particular motions that are currently being discussed.
Yeah, so actually, at this point, if we could, I would just like to get the direction to staff on what we're to do next in terms of getting the cost for the lands, a better understanding of the potential cost for the lands.
Yeah, okay.
We're going to report back on the costs for a complete facility from an engineering firm that will do that. We will report back to council on the actual cost to do that at your next budget
Right, okay,
meeting.
got it.
Okay?
Yep.
So the motion right now is for staff to follow up on the cost of the land, to obtain the cost for an engineering firm to complete a full design
Right.
and costing for the building of the satellite fire station, and also direction in there that township staff get an understanding from whether it be the GRCA or other provincial agencies, just in terms of their process for looking at whether there are any lands available and the process involved in purchasing from them.
Or leasing for $1.
Okay, so
I get a
that,
seconder?
I need a seconder, thank
Need
you.
a seconder? Councillor Goya, all in favor? Carried. So you had a second motion.
The next motion was piggybacking what Councillor Roth has said, basically to seek, ask staff to seek whether, how we can petition for legislation that would allow other fire departments to respond without cost to any structural fires we have.
Okay.
Just to that, I'm not too concerned about the cost. If a outside municipality wanted to respond to a structure fire in our township, I think it's only fair that we pay them. My concern is that the closest fire department should answer a structure fire, because there's lives involved.
And perhaps I shouldn't put that motion forward, because our mayor has asked a question of Councillor Gomes to what would be the per capita cost, so that should...
Well, we don't have to do this right now. I don't.
If I may, perhaps Councillor Roth would like to work with staff on preparing a notice of motion in that regard?
I
Okay,
could do that.
okay.
Was there a motion on the floor regarding the special levy for those area residents?
Yes, asking staff to look at how we can best phase this in, so it's not a one big shot hit over 1 year type of thing.
If I may, I'm looking at Mary. Perhaps that's something that council can discuss during their operating budget. So once we've got through capital budget, it's something that then Mary would probably be able to, tell you if you were looking at phasing half of it, this is what the impact is overall, operationally, once we get to the operating budget, if that suits council.
I guess the last thing is, I'm in the CAO's hands. Do you want us to approve, say, 10,000 or 15,000 to provide that estimate?
Is this for the engineering
Correct.
costs, if you want to give me an upset limit right now, that would help us move forward. We would then at least be able to investigate if we're able to do it for that cost before we report back at your next meeting.
Do you have a suggestion?
Somewhere around 10,000.
Can I get a seconder?
Well, just to clarify, okay, so I'll second it so we can discuss it.
No, you can say your comments.
Well, no, I have to second it.
Second.
To get it on the table for discussion. Robert's Rules of Order and all. Just if I could, Mr. Chair. So just to confirm what I heard from the CAO was they were going to come back with a price of, they were going to come back and report on how much it would cost to do that. But there's no cost to do that, so you're giving them carte blanche to go ahead, if it's under 10,000, go ahead and get the price? Or put 10?
I thought the CEO said she's going to come back with a price next council meeting. In order to do so, she has to have some authority to spend some engineering funds to go ahead and do that.
I think she was going to get a price.
The intent, Councillor Sapoulis, sorry if I confused the matter, is just to get a price on that, and I would bring that matter back. Ultimately, perhaps it's not necessary to give me anything right now, just because of the fact that I won't be able to do anything until council approves its budget in totality anyway. Okay?
Okay.
Okay. So,
We're going to go to,
Got to vote on that.
well,
we're not going to go forward with.
he's withdrawing it.
Okay,
Yeah,
withdrawn, all
Bring
right.
it Unless you want to bring it forward.
Capital budget report, fire.
Okay, so we're going to discuss the capital budget report fire currently and the current impacts. And if Chief Gomes wants to discuss the items.
So members of council, if you just want to perhaps, Chief Gomes, he's going to take you to the Schedule A for members of council's reference. You're on Schedule A, and you're going to go to the 2019 capital plan, correct, Ms. Mary? With respect to that, do you have a page number for the council members?
I'm sorry.
So we're going to start with the fire capital budget?
Yes.
Yeah, page 67.
So we'll go one item at a time, is that what the?
Yes, so I think you'll see the items there for the 2019 capital plan. So I suggest if the mayor will seek any questions of members of council with respect to what's included in the fire and rescue capital budget, and then Chief Gomes can go through his base budget requests after that.
Thank you, CAO. Council, do you have any concerns and questions regarding the new implications to the capital budget for fire? Go ahead, Councillor Sapoulis.
Yes, the 80,000 for levy under the land acquisition costs, I suggest that we defer that.
Comments?
That was 80,000 for land acquisition?
Levy.
Levy, yeah, if I could.
Councillor Bulmer?
Perhaps just leave it in while we're investigating it, and once we have that, it's just a placeholder for now. Is that possible then? Because we're looking into that.
I think the numbers are going to come in a lot higher than that. And the big decision is going to be, do we want to spend a lot more money right now on it? And $80,000 is $80,000 that is a levy charge, and it's going to affect our overall tax for our residents. So my inclination is we put it off at this time.
So if I could, Mr. Chair, that's presupposing the decision related to the costing then, I guess.
Yes.
Okay.
And okay.
So let me understand that. Like, that's a tax levy, and then is that not basically putting 80,000 aside for the land purchase in the future?
Yep.
That's what I'm saying is that it gets charged, say, in 2020 or whatever, as opposed to 2019.
But we're discussing that the cost is going to be higher for the land, so it's going to, I would be in favor of leaving the money in the budget now, so it's less of a hit in the future, because, you know, if we get the land for 500, 600, that extra 80,000 is there, that would be.
We can vote on it, but I'm not in favor of it.
So are you putting a motion forward to
remove it?
Okay, do we have a seconder for that? Councillor Roth? All in favor?
To remove it?
Remove it? Councillor Roth seconded it, and then,
You asked the question, yeah.
and, sorry, you're confused.
Sorry, can I just ask, am I allowed to ask a question on that?
Sure. I'm messing this up, it's my fault.
If we're sort of waiting to find out maybe what it's going to cost, I guess this $80,000, having it in levy is assuming that we're going to move forward with the purchase of land. Having it out is assuming that we're not. But are we not?
Not this year, Phil.
Not this year. Are we not able to put it in a reserve?
Yes.
Or then does it then restrict what we're able to do with it later? And I'm sorry for my lack of knowledge on this.
So for any projects that are not complete in 2019, our practice has been to put it in a capital carry forward discretionary reserve to be utilized in a future year. So yes, it would be contributed to a reserve at the end of 2019 if it was not spent. Or council could give the direction to utilize it for another purpose in the following year.
But that doesn't necessarily restrict us to only use it for fire in the future if it's not used in this year. Capital carry forward can be used for other.
The capital carry forward is just based on projects that are in your 2019 budget.
Yes, it can be used for something else, I think is the
Yeah.
question in the future. It doesn't lock it into the fire hall.
Okay, so it would depend on the wording of your motion. If we were talking about including it, right now there's a motion on the floor to remove it. But if you were to, if there was a motion on the floor to set aside $80,000 for a specific project and it be put in a reserve, then it requires another council motion to change the use of that funds for a different purpose. But it is doable, yes.
Councillor Balmer, do you have any comments on the motion on the floor?
Well, I figure it's always easier to leave it in, and if we decide we get a pricing that says, oh, we can't possibly afford this now or in the future, we can take it out. But for now, I always figure it's better to have it there, and if we don't use it, if it takes us till June to get the price and we don't use it, it just reduces what we need to take in next year for other reserves. So it's not going to waste.
Councillor Roth?
Well, I don't think it'll go to waste anyway. If we decide to go ahead with this, we'll still have that $80,000 in our coffers.
Yeah.
So I don't see any purpose in holding on to it and adding it to the levy this year.
Sorry, I misunderstood that last comment.
Well, if you're going to leave it in, then it's on this year's levy.
You're in favor of that?
No.
Oh, no, okay. Sorry, I just misunderstood you. Okay. Yeah.
We have enough to deal with.
I think we got a lot more here that we haven't addressed, and to me, leave that in right now when we're not sure what the true costs are, we're not sure which way we're going. My suggestion is we move it off a year and not put in this year's levy. Simple as that.
Councillor Glade, do you want another chance to comment?
No, that's okay.
If I could.
Yes.
And this is not our one and only kick at the can either.
Yeah.
We will be back looking at this capital budget at our next meeting. And we'll have another capital budget meeting, will we not? We usually have at least two. Is that right, Madam CAO?
Well, typically, we work that we get through capital at this particular meeting and operating at your next meeting, and then you're looking at everything combined.
Yeah.
Yes. So, I mean, there is opportunity to change, of course.
Yeah.
Yeah, my position, with this land cost, and Mary's done a wonderful job on the budget this year, all staff, and I'd really like to start saving some money for that land. I just have this envision of a very large tax levy if we decide to go forward with this satellite station. So I'm torn. I would like to see it stay in there. So, go, Councillor.
How about a compromise? What if we cut it to 40? Half this year, half next year.
Councillor Spoulos?
If that gets your vote, yes.
Is that a motion?
Well,
I really don't want to play. Like to me, I think it's important that we're go one way or another way. I really don't want to compromise. So my motion is to move it out of this year's levy. We got a lot more money, a lot more issues to worry about. There's some other issues that we haven't even addressed yet.
Yes.
Such as the border structures that are not included in the budget, and my concern there is we should be including it in the budget. So that's my motion. My motion is to move this off a year and
I just do need clarification. Is it to remove it and place it in 2020, or is it to remove it, period?
move it and place in 2020.
Thank you.
Okay. I have a seconder for that.
Yeah, Ken.
Yeah, so if I could then, if I were to put a practical point on this, though, I'll make sure I understand what we're talking about then is, I think it was Councillor Roth mentioned it, that we're still moving ahead on Councillor Sapoulis's suggestion of, let's get those land prices, let's sharpen up the information so that we can then put proper numbers in the budget in the future. We're not.
Yes,
Okay, I think that's.
Like, you're not going to get a land purchase this year, given where we are right now. By the time you get the numbers together, by the time you go back, start canvassing the market, your deal isn't going to be till next year. It's not going to be done in 6 months.
So if I could ask one more question of Councillor Sapoulis, then I was really interested in your concern the other day with asset management planning and trying to smooth out the bumps. And I guess collecting some of this money slowly is one of the ways I always think of how we're going to smooth out those bumps.
My understanding that this is not in the asset management plan at this time.
No, I recognize that, but I mean, as a philosophy overall, to smooth out the bumps in expenditures, I guess that's what I think that's.
I agree with that, and the time to do that, I think, is at the end, once we agree to what's in the budget and see if there's anything to do that, rather than doing it piecemeal type of thing. My approach is you would go through it, what's in, what's out, and then look to see what's if it's a bump or not.
Okay.
Okay, so the motion stands to defer
Yes.
to 2020. All in favor?
Carried.
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 Okay, is there any other questions or concerns? And should I go through this line by line and ask each? Looks like we're going to be purchasing a thermal imaging camera. I'll ask Chief Gomes, this is just replacement of a current piece of equipment?
That's correct. So this is a replacement for a thermal imaging camera that we presently have that is very outdated. Thermal imaging cameras are technology-based, and that being said, our previous capital budgeted amount for this item was $10,500. Just through a reduction in the prices of thermal imaging cameras, we can now get a camera that suits our needs for under $6,000, and that's why the request is $6,000 instead of the previous $10,500.
Any comments or questions from council regarding the purchase of the new camera? No. Councilor Goodwin. I noticed that I took a walk over and looked at pump 31, and there's a request for some body work, and the one side definitely needs some attention. How long will pump 31 be out of service for this repair?
Based on our previous paint and body work that we had done on Aerial 33, I would estimate that it would be out of service for about 1 week.
And you've received a quote for the body work from a local company, or?
That's correct. So the same company that provided that service to Aerial 33 did a great job in our opinion, and we requested this quote from them.
So that's a new budget line item. Does council have any questions or concerns? Council Ulmer?
Thank you. Can you just refresh my memory on how many times we've kicked this one down the road?
This is the second time I've come in front of council for capital budget items, and this item was pushed aside last year, and that's why we're readdressing this item this year, or it's proposed again this year for 2019.
But I seem to recall it came up before that, too.
It might have through the previous Fire Chief Good.
How, and at the time, I'm asking because each time we delayed it, we believed it would deteriorate that much more if we delayed it another year. How is it, I've heard the mayor suggested it's looking bad on one side. How fast is it deteriorating now?
Structurally, it's deteriorating a little bit near the hinges of some doors that we have, and paint just keeps flaking off the piece of apparatus. It should also be known that that piece of apparatus is due for replacement in 2025.
So 6 more years of life.
That's correct.
Well, I like to maintain them so they're worth as much as possible. I wouldn't like to see it taken out of service before it got our full life out of it. So, okay. I support moving ahead with it finally. So, thanks.
Just a quick question. Is it aluminum body or steel body?
Aluminum body.
Can't rust.
Oh, sorry, did I use the term rust? No, it's like I think it oxidizes.
It's oxidized.
Yeah, so it appears similar to rust. It's a different process, but yes, we have bubbling on the structure there of the aluminum.
It's got to be done.
Does council have any other questions in the first section there through pump 31 down to the satellite, other than the removal of the satellite? Is there any other questions?
Well, I had something on the CO pulse meter.
Sure. Go.
As Councillor Roth points out, we're always talking about lives, so it's difficult to ask questions about something that is being, explained to us as an important life-saving piece of equipment. But we've never had one before, have we? This is not a replacement. This is a new piece.
Exactly. So this is a new piece of equipment, and with this carbon monoxide pulse oximeter, what it does for us is we put it on a patient's finger as soon as we're doing a patient assessment. It gives us their pulse rate, their oxygen saturation, and then what's unique to this piece of equipment is it lets us know what percentage of carbon monoxide they actually have attaching to their hemoglobin in their blood. So what it does for us is if we go to any carbon monoxide calls or calls where people are generally unwell, it's a tool that we can use to diagnose their condition, because carbon monoxide poisoning basically shows the same symptoms as flu-like symptoms or headaches as well, right? So this is the only way to determine the amount of carbon monoxide in somebody's system until they get to hospital.
So again, Councillor Roth brings lots of good ideas to the table here, and one makes me think, why aren't these in the ambulance instead of with us? I mean,
that's a great question. So I did approach Guelph Wellington Paramedic Service to ask if they had a similar piece of equipment, and they do not. They do not have something that can capture carbon monoxide poisoning in patients at this time. That being said, Cambridge Fire Department utilizes the same piece of equipment in every lead vehicle, which means that they have it in 6 of their vehicles at the present time, because they see the importance of this.
Well, I'm thinking in similar to, this is something I'd like to approach. If we think it's of such value, I'm sure we have the ambulances respond to places where people are suffering from carbon monoxide poisoning where you're not responding, and I'd like to see we ask the county to have these placed in the ambulances rather than have them with us, and then everybody get benefits from it. Everybody who has a medical call, instead of just the people who happen to have the fire department there.
I think that would be a very good recommendation.
Thank you.
Councillor Roth?
Yeah, so are you suggesting we don't get one?
Yeah.
Well, I thought the whole idea of this was to protect our firefighters.
That's one component of it, but it's also for patient assessment out there in the public. That being said, when we do have a structure fire or our firefighters enter hazardous conditions, when they go into rehab or we do a firefighter assessment, this is a great tool to utilize. Also, that being said, when we do enter conditions like this, or we have these type of emergencies, we always request that Guelph Wellington Paramedic Service or another paramedic service come to the scene and provide medical care for us. So the option of asking the county to supply these in their ambulances, I think, is very viable.
Okay, I misunderstood that part because I thought probably we answered a lot of these calls that the ambulance wouldn't. And I'm just thinking of the protection of our firefighters. So if the ambulance does come, does it always come?
It comes to all of our emergency calls where we enter hazardous conditions. It comes to all tiered medicals. The only component that I can think of right now off the top of my head that would be a type of call that they would not respond to is carbon monoxide alarms going off. So at that time, however, if we did feel that the people affected by the alarm might be showing symptoms of carbon monoxide poisoning, we could request an EMS unit to come to the scene.
Okay, so now I'm going to throw it back to you.
Sure.
Are you comfortable not having one in our department and having it in the ambulance?
100% comfortable.
Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor William?
No, I have no comment.
Are we voting on this?
I
have to.
have some comments first.
Well, okay, I'll make a comment. I really don't want to micromanage the fire department when it comes to issues like this. They're the experts, and I bow to the judgment in matters like this. Certainly when we get into bigger things like property and all that sort of thing, sure, but not this.
Just to, for information purposes, the City of Guelph and the ambulance service, they have a different unit. They wouldn't be purchasing, I wouldn't believe, the individual monitor to go on your finger. Guelph Fire has purchased the same unit that the ambulance carries, and it plugs into the actual, and it's significant more cost. So, you know, if we approach the county, I don't believe we'll see the same costing because it has to be specific to their units. But I'm in agreement with Councillor Sapoulis that, you know, Chief, you're the expert, and if it's something you believe we need, then I'm in support of it. So, Council, if there's any other questions or concerns on that first section, under the fire and rescue.
Just to clarify then, so the ambulances already have a CO?
From my understanding, they don't have the same.
Not the same, but they have sign that does the same thing.
Fire has a SP CO. It goes on the end of your finger. It's a significant cost. I cannot remember it. Ambulance is not carrying it. We've had it for years. So I you know, if they were going to be going forward with it, I would have suspected they'd see it already. So it's not a standalone unit. Yeah. As the similar that Chief Gomes is presenting to us today. It's just a different unit.
All right.
Okay, so if I can get are we going to do a motion? Or you want to?
Yeah, if I can. I'm just going to ask, with respect to the BBIs, that if there is any that any member of council doesn't support, then we should
vote on them.
Vote on them. Otherwise, we're going to accept them in their entirety.
So we're referring to the operating budget BBIs, right, Karen? Or are we talking about capital?
Capital.
Okay,
Capital.
because there's also some fire and rescue operating budget.
No, we're just dealing with
Okay.
capital. And so just for council's information, what you've gone through already is the thermal imaging camera. And the, just so that I'm tracking it properly, the paint pumper, 31 truck body, and now we're on the carbon monoxide pulse oximeter. And am I to understand correctly that this is being removed?
Well, I had some questions about it. I think Councillor Sapoulis has made an interesting point. I wasn't married to removing this. I just wanted to clarify, you know, the benefit, and is there some other way of providing the same thing that would be better than us having one? That's all. So, because we're talking about having one. So,
Chief Gomes.
Okay, so I did like the recommendation by council to see if Wellington County Paramedic Service would entertain the costs associated with purchasing these units for themselves. That being said, we don't know what the outcome of that would be. And if they do that, as the mayor alluded to, they would probably have to do it for all their units, which would be a high cost. And if Guelph Fire does have this supplemental piece of equipment already attached to their units, I'm pretty sure that Guelph Wellington Paramedic Service declined that additional purchase. So I don't see us in the future requesting one of these units per apparatus. This would be a one-time ask for our fire service.
Yeah, I'd rather have one than not. Just looking for alternatives.
Excellent. Thank you, Councillor Palmer. Okay, so can we get,
So now we're on to the apparatus tires.
okay, any questions or comments from council? None? So Chief Gomes, you and I had a quick conversation. In the past, we didn't have a program. Going forward, we're going to have regular maintenance of the tires, and do you see any future trucks needing them in the near, like, is there any other vehicles that have an immediate need for replacement?
Okay, so what we did through the asset management process is we recognized that we weren't accounting for tire replacement. There is an NFPA standard that talks in regards to fire apparatus tire replacement. It recommends every 7 years that the tires get replaced, just based on the rubber compound breaking down, not on the depth of the tread. That being said, we decided that 7 years might be a little short for our fire service, because our fire apparatus, the majority of our fire apparatus has a 20-year life cycle, that at the 10-year mark, we would schedule a tire replacement for them. We have had tires already blow out as we're traveling to and from emergencies, and just recently from one of our tire inspections, it was noted that we had the belts actually pushing through the rubber of one of our tankers, so we had to do an immediate replacement of those tires at a very high cost to us this year. To answer your question, Mayor, through asset management, we do have a very thorough schedule now for tire replacement, but we are playing catch-up for 2019, and that's why the request is for $14,806 for tire replacement in this year.
Any questions or comments? Okay, we'll move on to the structural firefighter ensemble. How many, so I'll ask council first. Do you have any questions or concerns? Councillor Bulmer?
Maybe more of staff, of Mary. I was just wondering if this seems to be a regular thing we're always doing. I wonder why it needed a base budget increase as opposed to just being part of the regular ongoing maintenance of stuff.
It's not a base budget increase, sorry. It's a capital budget sheet, and we do it for all of our 2019 proposed projects.
Oh, okay. I was reading all these as if they're a base budget increase.
This is part of the capital budget, and
Yeah.
it's called a capital budget sheet, and we do it for all of our current year proposed projects, just so council has an understanding of
Right.
the purpose of it.
Got it. Thank you. That makes more sense then.
Just a quick comment. I liked your project sheet saying that you are going to look at economizing by purchasing with other firefighter organizations as well.
Oh, is this in regards to the structural firefighting gear? Okay, yes, thank you.
Any other comments or questions?
So
All right.
we're good with fire then? Oh, I think.
Okay, so I just wanted, just because I want to provide you guys with an update as we're going through this, because I know in the report I've indicated a 1.40% tax rate increase, but as we're making some updates, I'd just like to just be clear. So the items in fire's capital budget is just that the land purchase has been deferred, and that's the only item, right? Okay.
Just a motion to accept
And
capital.
Mr. Mayor, if I could just speak. There's one other item that's noted on Schedule A. It's the second item, SCBA cylinders. The reason the value is zero there is previously we had budgeted $6,000 for cylinder replacement, but in 2020 we're scheduled to replace all of our SCBA, so we did not find it prudent to spend $6,000 on new cylinders that would not or might not be compatible with the SCBA that's chosen for 2020.
Thank you for foreseeing that and finding that efficiency.
So just a mover and seconder. for
I just
fire
need
capital.
a mover and a seconder for fire capital. Council, all in favor? Carried. Sorry, this is,
So now the 2019 fire forecast.
Okay, so in order to get to the 2019 to 2028 capital budget and forecast for fire and rescue services, please go to page 138 of 175 of the council agenda package, not the addendum package, but the council agenda package. So 138.
Chief Gomes, do you want to present your forecast to council, or?
I'll take questions. Thank you, CAO.
I'm sorry, guys. So, I'll open up to council if you have any questions or concerns for Chief Gomes on the Rescue 35 truck. This is the first item. Is there any, Councillor Spoulos?
Does this price assume a new unit?
For Rescue 35 replacement in 2020, yes, that's for our new rescue truck.
Okay. We done an assessment of what would it cost to do used?
I haven't done that assessment. Typically, I could look into it a little bit further, but typically, fire departments have a life cycle for their fire apparatus similar to ours, because they figure that's the lifespan or the useful lifespan of their apparatus, and then they sell it at that time. It's also was recommended through our asset management consultants that we not entertain purchasing used apparatus, that to get the best, I guess, value for our apparatus would be to purchase new.
Okay. Correct me if I'm wrong, but the last fire truck we purchased was used, correct?
Yeah.
That's correct. So the aerial that we purchased is the 75-foot aerial we purchased from the U.S. was a used vehicle. That vehicle, and I could gather maintenance records, has cost us quite a bit of money in maintenance. It also has been out of service quite a bit. It's also one reason I think it was sold to us is American LaFrance is out of business, and they were out of business for a few years prior to them selling the vehicle to us. So we really struggled to get parts associated with doing repairs to that vehicle.
Okay, I understand the logic, and I guess when push comes to shove, when it comes to 2020, I'd like to suggest we look at used and see if there's an opportunity. Right now, I'm okay with the recommendation we stay as is.
Okay, thank you. Any other questions or comments? Councillor Roth?
I noticed in one of the reports I read from this, but I've read a lot, but the previous chief recommended we combine two trucks and just have a pumper tanker, and did I read somewhere that you aren't recommending this?
That's correct. So the previous report that I spoke about, so that was 2018-005 on the proposed satellite station. Definitely, if we were to have a second satellite station, that would have to be serviced by two pieces of apparatus, a pumper and a tanker. That was also recommended through a master fire plan. That being said, then, it would not make sense to reduce the number of apparatus that we presently have. I do have other concerns that we, based on the fact that we shouldn't reduce the number of apparatus. One of those concerns is our tanker shuttle accreditation that we presently have. I don't think we can maintain the obligations of that accreditation with reducing our apparatus by one tanker. I also know that recent structure fire events that we've had and multiple events at the same time, that we should not reduce our apparatus number to 5 from 6. We've also had verbal conversations with neighboring fire departments in regards to our reliance on their service supplementing our service. These statements came from the fire chief in Guelph and also one of the deputy chiefs in Cambridge. And I do have a copy of that email from the fire chief in Cambridge.
Okay, I'm looking at it from a financial aspect where we only have tires to replace on one vehicle and we only have one engine to change the oil in. To me, it sounded like a really good idea, but again, I don't know a lot about fighting fires, so. It's not till 2025, so that was going to happen if I remember correctly.
That's correct.
I probably won't be here.
Thank you. Councillor Goya?
Are we still just on the Pumper 35, or are we on?
Yes, still just discussing Rescue 35 and the
Rescue
projected-
35? No, it's okay.
I don't have any comments on that as well. So on to the next item is the SCBA cylinders. Any questions or comments? Structural firefighter ensemble. Any questions or comments? I do notice, Chief Gomes, that it's a lower number than what we have in the budget this year. Just less items.
That's correct. So we need less suits for our firefighters in those future years. So once again, through the asset management practice that we did, which I thoroughly appreciate, you can see that the numbers drop. Even in 2022 right now, we aren't scheduled for any replacement whatsoever of our firefighting gear.
All right. The satellite station building, any questions or comments?
Yes, I think we should move that off a year till 2021. And to Council Boomer's point, this helps with the peaking. You notice that right now 2020 is 1.5 million. If we move off to 690 or whatever the number is, that drops that down considerably. And the next year, 2020 was 83,000. So this sort of starts even out the peak. It starts avoiding borrowing money to pay for peaks.
Okay, can I get a seconder? Councillor Roth. All right, comments? Councillor Bowmer?
So we're talking about moving the entire project to 2020 or 2021?
Well, the building cost is in 2020, so if we
Right.
moved off the purchase of the property. to
1 year.
1 year, so we should
Yeah.
move that off a year as well.
Yeah, makes sense.
Councillor Goya?
I think that's a good recommendation as well. However, the agreement with Cambridge Fire, it expires in 2021?
It actually expires in 2020. However, our CAO has been very good at negotiating this contract with the City of Cambridge,
Okay.
and I'm pretty sure that we could extend that contract if we needed to.
Okay. Okay.
Councillor Spillis?
No, it's fine.
I agree. I think that's an excellent recommendation. So all in favor? Carried. All right. So I assume we'll have another motion here. So the satellite station equipment, any questions or comments?
That moves as well.
Do we have a seconder?
That's a 51,000.
Yeah, 51,750. Councillor Roth. Any comments? Councillor Bulmer?
No.
Okay, all in favor? Okay, move that. All right, this next item is the extrication equipment in the amount of 52,500. Any comments or questions from council?
Yeah, what is that specifically for?
Okay, so what that's for is a vehicle rescue for the majority of the time, and maybe the odd agricultural equipment rescue or industrial equipment rescue.
Or is that a replacement of something we have already?
Yes, yes, it is a replacement of a present system that we have. However, we would be utilizing new technology for this and purchasing 3 pieces of equipment for the new rescue truck that operate through a battery versus a bunch of cables and a gas-powered power plant.
Thank you.
Any other questions or comments? I have a quick question. Are you talking about replacement? Have you investigated the hydraulics?
Yes, that's what I was referring to is hydraulics, so we would be switching over to that new technology for the new rescue truck. For the remainder of the equipment in the rescue truck, other than the watercraft, we would just move our existing inventory over to the new vehicle.
So this number represents the hydraulics price.
Yes, and to be specific, it represents one RAM unit, one spreader, and one cutter unit, so 3 different units.
Other questions or comments? Now we'll discuss. Oh, Councillor Roth?
Yeah, what is a watercraft?
A watercraft is an inflatable vessel that we presently have on the rescue. It's the only means that we have to get out into our waterways. So whether or not it's flood conditions, a pond, a lake, a little stream, that's what we utilize. We also utilize this vessel for ice water rescue because it can act as a toboggan as well.
And is it done? The one we have now is done?
No, it's still presently in use. However, it's reached its suggested lifespan, I think, of 10 years. So it's a rubber material. Once again, all that compound starts to break down, degrade, and now the newer ones are actually a lot more suitable for the conditions that I mentioned in regards to rescue. This older piece has some limitations to it.
Any other comments or questions on the watercraft? And so we'll discuss the self-contained breathing apparatus. Any comments or questions from council? We kind of discussed that earlier with your cost savings for this fiscal year, right? You're going to replace everything next year. Fire equipment for $10,000. Any comments? No. And fire vehicle replacement of $50,000. Any comments or questions?
Just a question, is that enough money in the budget to pay for all these vehicles eventually? Like you're socking away $50,000, we got a big hit in 2020, and then we got another hit in 2025, and so on and so forth.
Ines, can you answer that?
It likely is not enough, just based on the asset management work that we're currently doing, and also prior to budget approval, I will be providing you with your balances and discretionary and restricted reserves as a result of this capital budget and forecast, and we can look at how much extra we need to budget in these reserves as part of all that. So,
If I could just,
Councillor Bulmer?
I think Councillor Sapoulis has identified an interesting point here that maybe as part of easing into the additional cost of asset management, are you suggesting maybe we should look at this one to add to this line this year, or maybe later in the process?
So CFO is indicated as part of the process to look at the amount of money who have reserves. She will identify, and at that time, we can make the decision.
We can increase it. Okay.
How much to increase it by.
because I know that even the public works equipment replacement reserves, as it relates to replacing trucks and such, in the forecast, you're going to see that there's years where the reserve contribution is recommended to be significantly higher than what we're currently contributing, just based on my last report to council as it related to the balances in our reserves, because there were many negative balances in some of these reserves to deal with our current asset replacement requirements.
Okay, good, thanks.
All right, thank you. All right, we'll move on. Is there any questions or comments on the 2021 capital plan summary for fire and rescue? And any comments, council?
I just don't know if Mary has the page reference number for members of
I'm
council.
sorry, Karen?
Page reference number for the 2021 capital for fire?
Isn't that summarized?
It's in the same page.
On
Is it?
138?
Oh,
Yep.
everyone has it? As long as
Yeah.
everyone has it to reference, that's fine.
There's 4 items there.
Okay.
Any questions or comments for 2021? Okay, so going forward on the 2022 capital plan summary for fire and rescue, any questions or comments? No? Okay. Yeah.
2023.
Let's keep going. And now 2023 capital plan summary for fire and rescue, any comments or questions? I don't see none. And 2024 capital plan summary for fire and rescue. I don't see. Try to replace anything? No. Excellent. And 2025 capital plan summary for fire and rescue. Any comments or?
I'm just wondering, the structural firefighter ensemble in 2025 is quite a lot higher than it has been in any other year. Is that part of the asset management as well?
That number came up from expiry dates to our
Okay.
gear. So
Okay.
I'm assuming that in 2015, there was a large purchase of firefighter gear at that time. So 10 years from that time frame, we have to make up for that.
Okay, thank you.
Any other questions or comments? All right. The 2026 capital plan summary for fire and rescue. Any comments or questions? No?
Just,
Councilor Spluss?
sorry, the portable pump, 15,000, what's that about?
That would be to replace our existing portable pumps. We have two, and that would be
Life cycle's expired in this.
that's suggested life cycle. What we could do closer to that time is do an assessment of our pumps and then report to council at that time.
Any other questions? No? Okay, the 2027 capital plan summary for fire and rescue. Any comments or questions? 2028 capital plan summary for fire and rescue. Any comments?
Yeah.
Jessica, yeah.
Just this American La France Quint. What is that?
Oh, my apologies. That's aerial 30, what we refer to as aerial 33. So that's our one aerial apparatus that we have right now. And just for background information, that truck is a 2003
Okay.
vehicle. That's when it was manufactured, and we purchased it 2 years ago.
Okay, thank you.
All right, I don't have anything.
That's it for fire.
Okay, well, I think we're done with Chief Gomes. Thank you for your patience. Yeah, you, me too, you, me both.
Thank you, Mayor and Council.
Excuse me, sorry. So now, why don't we start with Don,
Okay,
unless you want to.
yeah. Would council like a 5-minute break for a washroom, maybe a drink of water?
There you go.
Love
Great.
right. Moved by Councillor Roth and seconded by Councillor Balmer. The report, PW 2018-005 regarding Curry Drive. Traffic count be received. All comments, please, from council? Anything? Councillor Balmer?
Well, I have some questions on the report. But do you want us to accept it and ask questions, or?
We'll have comments first.
Okay, I got a question. I'm sorry, I wasn't able to get all the figures out of the charts there. You mentioned in the report that the average speed was about 50K?
That is correct.
That, to me, suggests half the people were going above that and half below. How much above? I don't expect the neighbors were worried about the ones going below, but what was the kind of, how much above were they, and was it significant, or? Are we talking 60K or?
As far as speed-wise goes,
Yeah.
or?
Yeah, speed-wise.
The highest speed recorded there was between 71 and 81. That was 2 vehicles.
Okay. So then that would be, so if they're coming, that's because they're climatized to Badna Road, which is 80 probably, and they come in and carry on at 80.
Possibly.
Okay, but and that was only 2 doing that, and that would suggest the rest were below, between 70 and 50?
Correct. The next 61 to 71 was a total, or excuse me, the first one was 9, actually, for total both directions.
Okay.
61 to 71 was 65 vehicles.
Oh, so that sounds like a fair number. It's posted for 50 in there.
51 to 61 was 227. But what the report does not give you is that breakdown of, those 227 vehicles to that, like the range is 50 to 60.
Yeah.
Right? Type of thing, so.
So there were some substantial, and that doesn't break it down in time of day, that's just.
That, it is all broken down time of day as well, yeah.
So the concerns about speed were somewhat legitimate in there, then there were some people doing well over 60.
I agree that there are people that are doing that, no different than anywhere else.
Yeah, okay. Thank you.
Councillor Goya?
My only question is, all of these readings were done on the same day?
That's
Is that
correct.
correct? Yeah, no, I don't really have any questions. I think the chart's pretty straightforward.
A lot of cars.
Councillor Sekoulis?
Yeah, I had a brief conversation with Councilman Balmer before the meeting, and looking at ways to curb the infiltration or curb the speed. One of the suggestions that Councilman Balmer made, which seems more plausible than the one I was suggesting. I was going to suggest prohibition of right-hand turns off Badna and so on, but what Councilman Balmer was suggesting perhaps is Curry Drive where it meets Ox Drive, put a stop sign there to deliberately slow down the traffic. If you look at your counts, there's more people going up Curry Drive up and down compared to going Ox Drive. I suspect that they have to stop at Ox Drive. That's why there are not that many people using that.
That is correct. The volume is higher on Curry. As far as using that intersection as a traffic calming measure is one of the first things that the TAC guideline will recommend you do not do.
Do not.
Which guy?
TAC.
Okay.
That they highly recommend you do not use stop signs or four-way stops as a traffic calming measure because it's not true traffic calming. In a lot of regards, you make it worse.
So what would they recommend? Something like a speed bump?
Yeah, I mean, there's all different types of mechanisms that could be put in place as far as road design goes. But to go to that nth degree, I would be suggesting that this would have to be full public consultation. There are certain guidelines that TAC recommends and processes to go through. Again, remembering that whatever is done there, if anything is done there, you have 49 residents and a business that needs to deal with that every day as well.
Thank you.
My question's for you. Oh, Councillor Roth, sorry.
Are you making any recommendations?
I am not making any recommendations based on the data that I saw. I understand there's a high volume of cars through that area. The peak times are not overly concerning in this report. I mean, if at all, there may be some simpler solutions as, you know, I mean, it's classified as a built-up areas, which automatically makes it a 50-kilometer zone. There are no speed signs posted. You know, would a speed sign do anything? I mean, we've gone down this road before. I talked to some other municipalities that have been going through some of the same things, more of an urban side of things. Obviously, electronic portable speed signs mounted on poles. You're starting to see a lot of that in urban centers. Brant County has designed. Nina, can you bring that up for me, please? The new thing out there now for signage wise is putting pictures on signs, pictures of families.
Really?
In that regard, reminding motorists it's a 50K zone. To that, so that seems to be a way a lot of municipalities are starting to go getting into this. I mean, what you're going to see are the signs that says that it's a safety zone. Well, this isn't an identified community safety zone as we know it, but there could be some different variations if we wanted to look at this heading down the road. But in saying that, I think whatever decisions are made for this issue, if we proceed on anything, that it obviously is going to set a precedence for the other subdivisions that are currently in the township.
Sorry, bear with me, everyone.
If I could.
Just have another question, if we can.
Yep.
The original letter for this issue came up from the COP committee.
That's correct.
Have the residents approached the township at all?
I've had one verbal conversation with one resident, yes.
Okay. Thank you.
Councillor Bulmer?
Yeah, just interesting the comment about concerns about precedents. I think the one piece that sets this one apart is this is being used as a shortcut around a traffic light. I don't think we have many other built-up areas that provide shortcuts around traffic lights. So I'm not so worried about the precedence there, because this is a somewhat special situation in the township. I'd be interested, and as Councillor Sapoulis alluded to, we had a conversation about this before the meeting, and I remember as a kid growing up, those signs were always referred to as political stop signs as opposed to traffic. So I'm also hesitant, but we also discussed the potential that the Highway 6 bypass might, in the long run, reduce this shortcut. So is there any risk in putting up as I call them, political stop sign in the short term, and if the problem alleviates itself when the bypass is built, we could take them out again?
Anything is possible. All I'm doing is voicing the data that's out there and the concerns through official TAC guidelines.
Yeah, and perhaps we're talking two different things here. We're not just looking at traffic calming, we're looking at, in this case, we're trying to traffic diversion or get them to avoid this option, to make it less, appealing as a shortcut. So is that still considered traffic calming when you're trying to discourage traffic? Traffic discouragement, is that the same as traffic calming?
Whether it be traffic signs, stop signs, information sign, or not information signs, but they're only as good as the enforcement that is there. If you look at that intersection, that three-way intersection, it is a wide open intersection.
Yeah.
We have intersections we already know that people don't stop for stop signs, and I would say that this is probably would go down that road as well.
Which might make it worse.
Correct. Or the other alternative to that is people do stop, and now they try to make up the time to do it.
And the noise.
Correct.
Okay, so then you mentioned that it's not posted at 50 in there. So can it be enforced if it's not posted?
Yeah, under the Highway Traffic Act, any build-up area is an automatic 50.
So perhaps the first step is to ask for some enforcement and see if that leads to some change in behavior. Is that what you're?
It's definitely would always be welcome to have enforcement on any of our roadways. We know speed is an issue throughout the township, so.
Is that something we can leave in your hands to contact to request enforcement, or is that something someone else should request?
No, that's fine. I can pursue that avenue with the inspector as well, yes.
I'd like that. At the very least, if we could go that route to start, I think that'd be, because the concern that came to the COPS committee did come from residents. It wasn't made up by the COPS committee, so. And it was, and you're right, it was one or two residents, I think, that contacted the COPS committee, but still, the numbers do suggest people are speeding in there. There might be some fishing to do there. So thank you very much.
Through this report, it shows that the majority of the cars are traveling between 51 and 61, but as you stated, we don't know if they were doing 51 or 59, but mostly people are within 10 kilometers of the speed limit. I agree with Councillor Balmer. It's a shortcut living in the area. People are just avoid that intersection down at Badna on Highway 6 is just terrible. I'll sit there for minutes where just 500 meters up the road, for some reason, it's a lot easier to get out. I was kind of leaning towards the stop sign as not traffic calming, but personal experience that when that speed limit sign blinks at you because you're going too fast, it really makes you cognizant of the fact that you're speeding. So I don't know if we're going to have a motion on the floor, but maybe that's an avenue we can go forward with. Is I believe they're out there. They're solar powered, so we could investigate the costs of installing a couple solar powered speed limit notification signs, and but that's all I have regarding. Is there any other comments or questions? Is there any motions on the floor for Curry Drive?
I'm going to suggest we leave it alone until we have more complaints.
Is there a seconder for that, or?
Yeah, just receive the report and leave it at that. Yeah.
Or perhaps a bit of enforcement and then see what happens, and that's something that
We want to amend that so that there's enforcement.
I've taken, based on Councillor Bulmer's request, I've just taken direction that staff will follow up with the OPP just with respect to request additional enforcement, if that's okay with council. Okay?
I'm going to call the vote. So all in favor to receive the report? Carried. Yeah. So now we're going to go to, I believe we're going to go to Public Works. So 2019 capital budget. And we're going to start with Parks and Rec and the ORC. So the ORC equipment, the first item is $5,000. Comments or questions from council?
What page with?
68.
Has everyone found it?
7.
I'll just make sure everyone
Okay.
has it, okay?
Thank you.
You got it? Okay.
I got it.
I'm okay.
Yes, I have it. Sorry.
Okay, so yeah, the first item is the $5,000 for ORC equipment. Any comments or questions? Mr. Creed, just curious what that 5,000, what equipment is that for the ORC?
I can, so those are just our reserve contributions. So when, on page 68, you see, you'll see a column that says reserve contribution, and when that says yes, those are just contributions to all of the ORC's equipment replacement.
Okay.
Yeah.
Perfect, yeah. All right, so the next item is the ORC facility improvement. Any questions or comments for $10,000? No? Okay, on to parks. So parks infrastructure. This is again $25,000. Any comments or questions? No. The next one is parks equipment. Again, $5,000. Any comments or questions? Okay.
This was for parks in general.
Parks, yeah.
Yeah, one piece that came up, or maybe I should share with staff when we're talking about parks equipment. As the people in Borum, on Borum Drive were thrilled with the enhancements to the basketball courts, there was a concern that some of the other equipment is aging out, and wanted to make sure that it was on our radar, especially the slide there apparently is becoming old, and So if there was any, I expected that's what these last two items are for, is for the replacement.
So, the Recreation and Parks Master Plan recommended some upgrades to Boreham Park, so the playground equipment, and so it is in the 10-year forecast.
Yeah.
Okay.
It is noticed out there. So
Yes.
it's getting used.
Okay, the next one is the Puslinch Community Center Park back soccer fields for $584,255. I'll open that up to council for comments and questions. Councillor Gollmer.
Thank you. I'm sure there'll be lots of discussion on this, so I'll keep mine fairly brief. I just noticed when I looked at the sheet and the costing, I noticed that the bleachers and the benches and lighting were all be listed as separate costs. But the bleacher pads weren't listed as be tendered as separate costs, and I thought perhaps we should look at, if the bleachers are going to be tendered as a separate cost, we could also, the bleacher pads could also have that same notation beside them. Because if we're not going to have bleachers, we don't need bleacher pads, is that correct?
I would believe so.
That would be correct.
Oh, okay. And that's $143,000 that if, you know, and overall on all those points, I think we heard from soccer that they're fine without any of those, that the bleachers and benches, they're okay without them. So I would support the fact that the real main focus here is a full-size lit field. I think we heard that loud and clear, of similar quality to what's there at the PCC now. So that's where I'd like to have the discussion about all that. And I do appreciate the trail. I think that's a nice addition there too. And I have a question about that trail and the assignment of the county's $43,000 to that. Is that simply because that funding runs out in November of next year? So if we don't use it for this project, we have to use it for this because Fox Run might not be ready in 2019. I'm trying to figure out why it's assigned wholly to this one and not, maybe to another trail or split between two.
You are correct that the funding does run out at the end of 2019. They provided us with a 1-year extension.
Okay.
Yeah.
So if this project doesn't go through in 2019, that funding doesn't come, we've lost that 43,000.
Unless there's another project that you would like to utilize it for.
Okay. All right, thanks. That's all I have right now.
Councillor Goya.
I'm just wondering, and I'm just having a hard time wrapping my head around on the capital budget. It's showing a total of $584,225, and I'm just struggling with on the capital budget sheet which of these numbers that number represents.
I can elaborate. So very good question. So the 584 is in the capital forecast, but 70,000 was approved as part of the 2018 council resolution to begin the design. So that's where the difference is.
Thank you.
No problem.
And then my second question is in regards to the donations component of 89,000. How does that get handled? Who handles that, and how do we know how much that amount will be?
Right now, the township has been advised, correct me if I'm wrong, Mary, that the soccer club is willing to contribute. They've set aside $5,000.
That's correct.
At this time, there haven't been staff resources or a plan developed to obtain donations or to solicit donations, that might be a better way of saying it. So there would have to be some kind of project in order to reach out to the community to elicit, I guess, donations in that regard. So that has not been done at this time. We were hoping to see what the soccer club would come up with. And of course, the soccer club could also carry that out on behalf of the township in terms of perhaps reaching out to the community to look at where they could raise money to then in turn give back to the township for this particular project. That has not been done as of yet.
Okay. Thank you. That's all the questions I have.
Councillor
One
Spillis.
question with respect to the donations of 89,000. I wasn't around when the ORC was built, but obviously that had a component of donations as well. And does anybody recall how much we've gotten, received from donations, and which corporate donors were willing to contribute to it?
Is this for the ORC?
Yes.
Sorry, just one moment.
What I'm trying to do is see if there's an opportunity to get 89,000 in donations, and if that's not, then Councilor Boomer's suggestion that the bleachers not be purchased at this time makes sense.
I can provide some background on the ORC if you like, just on how that worked.
I do know how much we received in donations for the ORC back when it was built. But Councillor Ballmer, until I
Sure, it was
find
about,
it.
so it just on very rough figures, the total cost was estimated to be 2.1 million divided by 3 partners, the federal, provincial, and local, which is about 700,000 each. And the Optimist Club raised half of our share, which was approximately 350,000.
That is a good approximate figure, yeah.
Yeah, and they did that through community fundraisers, and once they had raised that money, they gave the check, they paid the township the committed amount. So.
Then the other is the other sources of funding. Are they solid? The Canada Infrastructure Program, the Trillium Fund?
I can elaborate on that. So a few months ago, we applied for the Ontario Trillium Fund capital grants. The announcement will be in January 2019, approximately. The funding for the Canada Infrastructure Program Phase 2 project has not been announced at this time.
So with the change in government, I don't think we could tell you with 100% certainty whether those funding opportunities will be available or not.
I only support this project as long as there's no levying, any levies to our residents. To me, it should be funded from third parties and parkland dedication fees and any other sources of revenue. So far, everything looks fine, but if we get a big hit that has to be funded from levies, I will not support this.
I have comments with that. I agree that this number seems. Oh, sorry. I have to give you a little bell. Yeah, I'm just eager to speak.
I agree with Councillor Sapoulis. I'm not in favor of this if there's anything on the tax levy. I think when we discussed this, it was totally based on this funding. I think we can alter this somewhat. If we don't get all the funding, we get some of the funding, I think we can go without lights. I think the donations of 89,000, I think we should go to the soccer club and say, you're it for tag, you got to raise $90,000 if you want this project to go through. They're a big organization. They can hold fundraisers. They're the ones that are really wanting this, and they're the ones that will be using it. So I think we gotta express that to them. They can say no, but it's going to affect the outcome of the project. So I don't know why they would. But basically, you know, you look at these numbers, and I know they look very high, and I'm sure there's savings within the project. But right now, we have to start somewhere, and again, like I say, there's no impact on the tax levy, so I don't have a problem moving forward with this as long as that remains.
Thank you. I agree. I don't want to see an impact on the tax levy. I think that this project can be done at a significantly less cost. I've had some informal conversations in the public, and there's a lot of support out there from individuals and companies that, landscape companies that are willing to donate their time and step forward for this community. one individual went as far to say is that he's pretty confident we could build a soccer pitch back there at no cost to the municipality. So can't guarantee that, but he's connected well in the community through the Optimist Club, the amount of fundraising they were able to do for the ORC. I'd like to see, you know, I don't think we need to build the best soccer field. I think Badna soccer field is a good example. They quote that it's just a grass field and it's one of their best ones. I think we need to level it, put up some soccer nets, and that would be sufficient. But with a component of soccer contributing significantly to this this project, like Councillor Rowe said, that tag they're it. So if there's any motions on the floor regarding this budget?
I have a question. I have a further question. Just to clarify, the 89,000 that we're talking about, that's based on a percentage of the overall project cost, is it, or not? Is it a fixed amount or a percentage as a share?
It's the percentage of the overall cost. I believe it's 15%.
Right. So if the cost of the project comes down, their share comes down, it becomes easier for them to achieve, right? Which, if we're being practical about what we're actually going to build there, you know, I even look at the $50,000 to create the soccer pitch as being substantially more than, I mean, the way you've characterized it and the way the existing pitches were built, likely didn't cost that much. So if we can just even reformulate this, I don't want to take it off of our radar, but I'd like to reformulate it so the numbers, as we talked earlier, more accurately represent what we're all looking for there, and that is a basic soccer pitch with the potential for lights, as opposed to with bleachers and all that stuff, because then that'll bring their share down.
First of all, I don't think we'll get the grant money if we don't do this professionally. In my previous experience at the TTC, when we wanted to do an in-house design and we wanted subsidy from other levels of government, they said, no, it has to be gone to the construction industry. And I think this is the same thing here. The governments will look at saying, okay, are you doing this in-house? So long, go do it type of thing. And correct me if I'm wrong, but that's my understanding of the situation.
Actually, oh, sorry.
Sure, CAO, please.
I just want to just emphasize too that we won't know the cost until we actually go through the RFP process, and it is a requirement of the grant funding, as Councillor Sapoulis has said, is that you have to be following your actual tendering procurement bylaw process in order to obtain the funding. So we won't know those actual costs until we actually go through the process of putting out the tender document and receiving those costs. And it is always a stipulation when the agreements that you sign to receive funding that you've gone through the proper procurement process.
Councillor Balmer?
If I could, just at the very least, I'd like to take out the 143,000 that's currently in there for the bleacher pads and make sure that the cost we're talking about reflects what we've all agreed we want to do.
Can I, the 144,000, that includes the parking lot ends, the bumper blocks, the asphalt walkway connections, and the concrete bleacher pads are just 13,000. That's a subtotal for that area.
Sorry, thank you.
No problem.
I didn't recognize it. I thought it was very expensive for a couple of concrete pads, so. But thank you.
No
So it's not
problem.
a significant impact then anyway.
So I'm going to make a motion that we accept it as is.
Seconder?
Well, it's already on the floor, isn't it, to be received?
Yes, so if no one's removing it from the actual capital project listing with no changes, then we won't, we'll just take a motion in totality unless there's an exception to the rule, if that's okay.
Next item, so Fox Run Survey and Drainage in the amount of $12,500. Any questions or comments? Councillor Balmer, did you have one?
Yeah, I think this is a good thing to move ahead with on this particular sheet. We're talking about drainage, but they also talked about encroachments into the park and clarifying where the property lines are and all those things. So in speaking with some of the residents during the campaign period, there does appear to be some drainage issues that may be affected by this as well in terms of soggy backyards and things. So I think it's worthwhile doing at least the planning for this solution in 2019 so that we can be prepared to do the work in 2020. So I'd like to move ahead at the very least with the studies and the planning for fixing it in 2020.
I agree. I think that for sure the property lines need to be identified, and if we're going to move ahead with the park, which I think members of council have suggested that they would like to do, the first thing to fix is the drainage. There's no point on doing it until we fix the drainage first. I do think we should move ahead with this for those reasons, but this does not incorporate the cost of what it may take to fix those drainage issues. And so as of right now, until we complete this, that cost is a big unknown, which makes it difficult to make a decision on the next item as to whether we go ahead with the construction of the park this year or in the next year, because as of right now, we don't have that whole picture. So I think this is an important first step to go ahead with in order to determine exactly what we're dealing with in terms of creating the park that is wanted by the residents.
Mm-hmm.
Councillor Spools.
Yes, the $115,000 you have cited in the restricted reserves, does that include an estimate for fixing the drainage, or that's strictly a walking path?
Councillor Stapoulis, are you discussing the second capital budget sheet?
Exactly, yes. Now I'm going on 20.
Just the next line down, I think you were
Next line down.
kind of
Survey and drainage is 12,000, and next line down is 115. So I'm asking if that 115,000 includes whatever work has.
It does not include any potential costs associated with drainage
So
component.
does the 12,500 include that?
No, no.
So what's the 100? So
Well, 115,000 strictly for the walkway, correct, and benches?
oh yeah, no, I'm confused.
So I agree with Councilor Goja that we have to make sure that we fix the first thing before we move to the next thing. And I don't know if you can do that as part of the 115 or not this year. So I'm okay leaving the 115 in if you can do the whole thing. If you can't, then we should be splitting this up.
So, council's direction was to include everything in the 2019 budget, but if you would like to defer the second capital budget sheet, which includes creating a walking trail and the benches, then that can be deferred.
Okay, I assume the whole, the 127.5 included everything, the drainage, the walking trail, the design, everything. If that's not the case, then I think we got to walk slowly, as Councilor Goja says. Let's get the drainage fixed and then move on with the trail.
I agree, so we need to leave the, oh my gosh, why do I keep doing that? Sorry, Councillor. Oh.
I agree. My big concern here is if the consulting fees are $12,500 for the drainage, it's pretty scary what the drainage is going to be, because I'm guessing it's going to be well over $100,000. And it may not be, but I don't know. But anyway, we'll never know until we ask the question. So I'm a little confused. I'd like to see this in next year's budget. But can we get the information on how much the drainage will cost that fast?
Yeah, should.
Yeah, if council approves this and the survey and the other work is completed, they'll be able to put a cost to the actual drainage works fairly quickly. And probably some different options as well.
Yes.
To deal with it.
And, you know, I think we got to move ahead with this as quickly as possible, and I'm always optimistic that the trail is overpriced, and I'm definitely sure the benches are overpriced, and I think we should continue. And once we get the drainage costs, then we have to reassess everything. Maybe. maybe we can build 2 trailers.
If I could just make a suggestion, depending on what council would like to do, if they're going to keep both projects in there, that perhaps we just add to the description of the $115,000 project, the drainage works, and then once we have the information come forward about what the costs are, we may need to split, phase it in over this year and next year, depending on what the costs are, because right now that's just unknown in totality. And if we just add to the description as phase 1 drainage works, and we keep the amount at 115,000, and then as we move forward, if it turns out that we need additional funding, we'll be back here during this time for your next budget cycle.
Well, if I could, Mr. Chair.
Sure. Councilor Bowman?
Yeah, I think what I'm hearing here and what I would support is the idea that I'd like to do all the planning necessary in 2019 so we can do all the construction, trail and drainage the following year, as opposed to doing, and that way we know it gives us time to get the public input in 2019 and plan for all the works, as opposed to, because I don't see these as 2 separate projects, I guess. I sort of see them as we'll plan for the work and then do the work. Is that where we're headed now, if I understand?
I believe so. I'd like to comment. So I walked the property, and the drainage looks like it's actually flowing towards the park versus towards the road. Is that a fair statement?
Yeah, there's 2 areas of concern. One is at the entranceway off of Deerview Ridge, which, if you look at the original development plan, there was a full-scale ditch line that went down that side and out to Fox Run, where the big new house was just built recently that runs down the right side of it. The other area of concern is in the, if you're at that same entrance in the far right corner at the lowest point in the park by visual, in the original development plan, all that water, again, was to be diverted to that same piece of property. That obviously is not the case in what's going on as far as that goes now. Why that is, I mean, one could speculate, but it just isn't doing that. So, and that's where I see the biggest issue, is in that far corner as well. Up top is, I don't think is a big issue. Obviously, there'd have to be a culvert installed in there to actually be able to access the park without going on private property there as well.
And these walking trails budgeted for $115,000, it's an accessible walking path. Do all the trails have to be accessible? Is there option to go to, say, like a wood chip path? I'm wondering if we're spending, $90,000 to get $10,000 of funding through the accessible walking path, program, or if so. That's my question to you: is does it have to be a paved path through the park that's accessible?
It has, if it is going to be deemed as an accessible path, it has to be done with a hard surface.
Well, that's what I'm asking. Does it have to be deemed accessible, or can we make just like a Wayne Stokely type trail versus the accessible?
The accessible path came from the request of the residents to have it accessible due to the elderly and that are well in the neighborhood to be able to use it.
Okay. Councillor Bulmer?
Thank you. Just further to that point, would a packed stone dust pass that test?
I believe it would.
So it doesn't have to be asphalt, but it has to be hard enough for wheels to roll on.
That's correct.
But then there's the maintenance cost of stone dust, but it's cheaper to put in and still get the funding.
And once you build an accessible path to this standard, then council will have to obviously put a service level to that. Whereas the Wayne Stokely Trail, which is fully natural, it was built with natural material. There are no benches, there are no garbage cans, no service levels are required, other than normal safety issues, as it would be on any township property.
Oh, if I could,
sure, Councilor.
I would like to put a motion on the floor that we, instead of considering these as 2 projects, consider them, I see them as tied. Several of us have talked about them as being sort of tied, but use redo the numbers so that 2019 is the year for planning, we've cost these different options. We've just had a couple of different discussions about whether is it worth going to the 90,000 to get 10,000, will stone dust work, all those sorts of things. So we can have all that information in 2019, including a design for both the drainage and the path, with a plan in putting the appropriate money in the capital budget for the construction in 2020. Does that make sense? That's a long motion, but I think we can shorten that up.
Councillor Roth?
If we're going to build a trail here, we have to do the drainage.
Yep.
Why wouldn't we do the drainage in 2019 and then at least in early 2020 we could have a trail? If we have enough time, we can maybe do it in 2020. But I don't see any reason why these two couldn't be split.
Okay.
Because the drainage has to be done, probably even if we don't put a trail in.
That's correct. I mean,
And I'm not saying we're not going to put a trail in, but get the drainage done, then we can consult with the people in that area and maybe discuss whether the trail really has to be accessible, how many people are in need of an accessible trail, whether stone chip is accessible. And then that gives us more time to do the trail that the people in the area really want. So I would really hate to defer the drainage.
I can support that.
2020.
Yeah. That works for me too. I just didn't know if we could get it all done
Well, we can try.
Yeah.
I'm okay with doing the drainage and meeting with the public and making sure that we have the right concept. But I think we should have some concepts out for the public to comment. We just can't
No.
say what do you want type of thing.
Yeah.
No.
Just say this is a hard surface. This is a non-accessible surface. I think you got to throw some design money in for that.
I agree.
Yeah, I think we definitely need to address the drainage. I guess I would be optimistic that we could maybe get all of the information we need and start construction early next year. I am wondering, one of the items identified as one of the things that was wanted at the park was signage to recognize where the park even was, because it's difficult to know. And I'm wondering if, I do believe that is part of this, and I believe it probably goes with our branding strategy as well.
Yes.
But I'm wondering if this park can be given some kind of priority to get the signage sooner than later, regardless of what we decide to do with the trails. At least we're identifying where the park is.
Perhaps I can just say that we can certainly take that as direction, and once we get through the drainage component of it, that would be the appropriate time to install a sign. And if I just may remind members of council that there hasn't been discussion, but we did note in the capital budget sheet that prior to finalizing the design and the concept, that there should be a public open house that's held to get feedback, as I think Councillor Sapoulis was saying. So I think in terms of timing, because we won't be able to take any action in terms of getting the costing for the drainage until after budget is approved. So your budget's approved in February. We will then engage the consultants to do the work. So you're looking at 2019 for the actual drainage component. And if you're also factoring in holding an open house with respect to what it's going to look like, I would suggest that would be taking place in 2019, and then you're actually looking at any works being constructed in 2020.
Yeah, I'd like to comment as well. I believe the residents wanted the path, and they maybe misunderstood the accessible part and the consequences of, financially. So I think the public information meeting is important, and we can have a couple different options for costing. But we have to resolve the drainage issue in 2019 first. That's the first step. It's very important. So those are my comments. We have a motion regarding that. Do you have another comment?
No, I guess staff can, what CEO suggested, I think is agreeable to everybody.
So is everyone all right? I'll just add the description of the drainage to the second item, and then we'll definitely report back to you in terms of what the costs are with the drainage once we know them. All
right, so we're going to go on to the next item. So PCC equipment. $5,000. Any comments or questions?
That's just contributions to
No.
reserves. so-
Reserves, yeah. Same with the facility improvements. Okay.
Discuss taking a break for lunch, what
okay.
time council would like that, I'm not sure.
Council, I'm just curious if you'd like to take a break for lunch now or set a time? What are your,
How long is this going to take us? Who's a good estimator of
6 o'clock tonight?
Oh, okay. Well, if it's going to be that long, then I would like a lunch break, but if we could wrap it up by 1 o'clock, but it doesn't look promising, does it?
Yeah.
Okay. Let's have,
It's up to council if they want to try and get through at least the,
Should we finish public?
the public works
Yeah.
component for this
Yeah.
year. And then if we take a break, then perhaps,
Yeah.
then we can go through Don's forecast for the items. So if we can get maybe just through this first part, and then if you can take a break.
all right, so we'll just carry on through this part. So, reserves. So we're going to go through Public Works, concession 4 to 35 to Side Road 20, and it's a levy of $280,000. Any comments or questions? Councillor Bomer?
Concession 4, no.
Councillor Spoulos? Or-
No, again, as staff know what roads need to be done. It's a question of we can afford it or not. That's basically the only decision I'm going to make. If we
Yeah.
say we got to do it, we got
Yeah.
to do it. Simple as that.
Yeah, I agree.
Councillor Roth?
I agree.
I agree. Victoria Road, Aberfoyle Pit 2 to County Road 36, and it's $169,421, and then of a grant, and so I guess our implication would be $41,019, and out of restricted reserves, $299,560. Any comments, Councillor Bulmer?
Nope.
Councillor Goya? Councillor Spoulos? Councillor Roth?
Yes, I'm just a little confused on this one because I know we did work on Victoria Road. And to me, it looks like it was all repaved. Obviously, that's not the case.
No, it was not. Obviously, the areas that were excavated and repaired were topped in with asphalt. If you recall, I'm uncertain how many years ago it was that we did a pad job on that road. We felt it best to, again, this was a very thin layer of new asphalt just to seal that back in to get us through the winter. And it'll be ground up with the rest of it and put back into the road base when it's done.
Yeah, well, my understanding was, I think I even talked to you about it, it was just the culvert work this last year, right?
Correct.
But then when I drove on the road with my limited knowledge of roads, I thought it was all repaved. Like, wow.
Yeah.
Did it really
No,
well.
I
Then
think
I seen this and I thought, oh, I guess it was wrong.
if you take a really close look at what you see as new asphalt, you will see a bunch of cracks already through it. So
Okay.
it's very thin.
Thank you very much.
Any other questions? Okay. Public Works Replace and Restore, $25,000. Any questions? Public Works Equipment, $50,000. Any questions or comments? Bridge and Culvert Inspections, 2019, $7,500. Any questions or? Okay. Concession 11 Railway Crossing, 34 to Side Road 17, $50,000. Any questions or comments? No?
Quick question. What type of standard you plan to use? Just basically asphalt? Are you going to have any rubberized blocks in front of the rails to mitigate the pounding of the asphalt at the rail?
Yeah, again, this is in combination with Guelph Junction Rail, as we just did on Carter Road. They need to upgrade this crossing. There will be rubber rail, mud rail put in on the Field and Gage side. New drainage culverts, new asphalt, because there's a limited amount of asphalt at that crossing now, which obviously causes a big concern on maintenance on the flashers and the wiring, so.
Thank you.
Any further questions? Councillor?
Did we pay all of this or does Guelph Junction Railway pay part of it?
This is a 50-50.
Okay, thank you.
Any further questions? No? Okay. Concession 1, 35 to Side Road 20 South, $303,000. Councillor Bulmer?
There's one question. It didn't list what the class of road or the current PCI was. I didn't see in that report. Do you know what that is? What class that one is in the PCI? Thanks. At least I couldn't find it.
Class 4, it says.
Was it class 4? And the PCI on that one?
65.
65. And we're moving towards the 60. And current recommendation from from the consultants for the asset management would be 60. How much time would it take to go from 60 to 65 on that road?
3 years. 2 points. Under the PCI, it's 2 points per season. But again, as I've mentioned previously, the PCIs are one guideline as far as, I mean, I can show roads that have PCI values. If you go by that strictly, that should have been done a couple of years ago. But the asphalt is still in great shape.
Yes.
We all know that the roads deteriorate at different rates. They're not going to deteriorate at 2 points every year.
Yeah.
Right. So again, it's a tool for us to use as a guideline in my recommendation. Again, there's nothing better than an actual visual.
Right.
And how much maintenance work we're doing at the current time to maintain it to the status that we need to.
So in this case, and it's the same with the concession too. I had the same question with both. So this is what you might want to call a paper PCI. Sorry.
That would be correct.
Where, based on the number of years since its last proper assessment, it suggests it's at this, but your visual inspection would suggest it's not at.
That is correct. It would be my visual assessment along with the amount of time and material that we've had to put into this section of road to maintain it before it gets redone. The concession one is not only the road service. We also have a fairly substantial culvert on that section that also needs to be done as well.
Okay, so I'm just trying to think ahead. I'm not trying to second guess your assessment. I'm just trying to think of when we move to an asset management plan that has these hard numbers out there, and then we're going ahead and doing one at 65 when you believe it's a 60. It'd be helpful if we could have that in the sheets then, so that I can understand that difference. Well, I don't mind asking you here, but
right,
you know what I mean?
Yeah, I would suggest that the PCI values that we're using now, I believe, were done in 2016. We've got the new asset management plan that's coming in.
Yeah.
Mary, you can correct me. I'm not sure what year it is, but we're actually going to be doing a full road evaluation at some point in the near future.
Mm-hmm.
So I would say that the numbers that we're using right now I would suggest they're as a guideline only.
We're going to go with the public soon with them, and I just want to make sure that I understand them and the public understands them the same way. So.
And I mean the asset management plan. I mean that whether you want to use a 60 or a 65 PCI, at the end of the day, if it's costing us a lot of money in maintenance, I'd be sitting here recommending that we do it regardless of what the PCI value is.
Okay, good. Thank you.
Any other questions or comments on that? Okay. Concession 2, Side Road 10 South to 32 for a levy of $5,400 and $228,000 discretionary reserves. Any comments, questions? Okay. Gravel packer, new equipment for grader, levy $26,000. Any comments or questions, Councillor Bulmer?
No, I think it's a pretty good idea. It's going to save us time and material, or time and truck, man and machine time.
Two questions. First of all, would it be more economical to buy this at the same time as we're buying the grader?
I can't say for sure, but normally when you put a tender package together and include it, you may get it a bit cheaper. But until that grader is replaced, which I believe is 2023, which is 4 years out, the savings that we're going to see or realize by purchasing this now will pay for this piece of equipment within 2 years.
That was going to be my next question. What's the operational cost savings you anticipate?
Right now, and actually, I'm going to ask Mr. Fowler to come down and give you just a brief construction history here as road builders and in regards to this piece of equipment.
afternoon.
Fowler?
Basically, it's a tool that will utilize, cut down on basically time spent on a block of gravel. Instead of relying on another vehicle, more fuel, another operator to provide what we'll call the packing of the loose gravel, this is will be a simultaneous spread or cut. Compaction basically falls behind all one vehicle. As the road is graded, you're basically compacting separate levels, which in the end will provide a more stable road base and will be done in a quicker time. And I'm confident that we'll cut down on the amount of times the grader will have to go to whatever gravel road is deemed to be needing grading.
I guess you can't quantify the operational cost savings.
Well, at this point, if you look at it, because we use the water truck, a tandem dump truck that basically does the packing after the fact, we allot on average a half an hour of time for that piece of vehicle to do that. So if you take that based on, a half an hour per kilometer at 50 kilometers of gravel road, we do it 6 times a year, that's 150 hours. Tandem and operator goes out for about $80 an hour at the low end, equates to about $12,000 a year. And less wear and tear on that vehicle. Mike and his staff met with Center Wellington yesterday. They have 3 of these and are looking to buy their 4th. And they have rationale out to, they have reduced the need for full grading by 25%.
Sizable benefit.
It's not money that's actual tangible. You can't pull it out of the budget, but it allows us to do other work because we're going to have the time to do it.
Thank you. Councillor?
Does it make the road better, longer?
Yes, it does.
So my corner won't have any potholes in it at all?
Washboard?
Conflict of interest here.
Washboard at CalFest will be eliminated.
I am confident to say that once we grade it, it will last longer.
So it'll last 2
Absolutely.
days?
No, I might give you a week.
Might get a week.
Okay. I'm getting tired, so I got a little fun.
Oh, yeah.
All right, thank you. Councillor Goya?
Yeah, I think that this piece of equipment I would definitely support based on the, so what I understand what happens now is the grader goes down the road and then the truck follows behind it and packs it down with its wheels, right?
Yes. Initially, we will send a water truck out first before the grader even
Yeah.
shows up. We pre-wet the road.
Yeah.
So that aids in actually cutting into like the hard surface. We try to soften it up. The grader will make a pass.
Yeah.
The water truck will then turn around and we create a windrow of gravel, usually in the center of the road.
Right.
What we require next, both for compaction and dust control, is the water truck will now travel down that windrow and pre-soak it. So if this is done a couple times, while we're working on that block, it cuts down on dust. When it comes to compaction, like most any type of soil, if you wet it, you'll get a higher PSI of compaction. And
But
that's
also
what
the
this
piece
roller
of
will do.
equipment is the whole width of the
That's
road.
correct.
So it's
The
packing
entire
it
lane
down
width.
consistently across the entire surface of
That's
the
correct.
road,
Right
as
now,
opposed to the ruts.
because we are packing with tires, you're left with ridges.
Right.
Which, in all honesty, we can't compact the entire road surface evenly.
Right.
So some ridges are left, and say you have a rain that night, that's where the water will gather against these ridges, and your rows of potholes form.
So this piece of equipment not only saves time, but it also will allow the grade of the road to stay
Yeah, whatever percent we choose
better,
to
longer,
put
I guess.
on the crown, you will have a straight, even surface.
And this piece of equipment can be used, like when you get a new grader, it can be put on the new grader and
Yeah, basically, we will have a fabricator come in, we'll measure our current grader,
yeah.
make what we'll call a hitch, but the actual roller piece is universal. So when the time comes in the 4 or 5 years, we need to purchase another grader, the only additional cost will be fabricating a new hitch for that type of grader, which we can't predict what kind of model it would be.
But the life expectancy on this would be much longer, I would think, than the
Yeah,
grader.
the one I viewed yesterday at Center Wellington, they've had 10-plus years with zero maintenance cost other than grease for the double roller bearings.
Good.
Thank you. Any other questions or comments? Well, thank you, Mr. Fowler. Appreciate your presentation.
Thank you.
I'm going to make a motion that we accept the capital plan for Parks and Recreation and Public Works, or ask for a motion, I should say.
Sure, I'll move it.
Move it. Seconder? Counselor, all in favor? Okay, carried. I'm going to say that we take a recess for lunch if council is okay with reconvening at 1, or that'd be acceptable. Come back for 1. Okay. See you guys at 1.